He touches a Hell's Angels bike. Nobody. That was the rule everyone in that diner knew. Bikers knew it. The truckers knew it. Even the waitress refilling coffee cups knew it. She walked straight toward it anyway. No hesitation. Her fear, no words. She reached into her pocket, pulled out a small silver ring, placed it on the seat, and walked back into the rain like nothing happened. Inside, 30 men stopped breathing at the same time. And the one man who mattered most went completely pale. Well, if this story already has you holding your breath, subscribe to our channel right now. Hit that notification bell and follow every single part of this story until the very end. A comment telling us what city you're watching from. I want to see exactly how far this story travels. Summer of that year had been the kind that dragged itself across the Arizona desert like something tired and mean. The heat didn't just sit on you, it pressed into you. Found every crack in your patience, every old wound you thought had healed. It reminded you that nothing out here was ever truly finished. That diner on Route 9 had stood in the same spot for 41 years as roadside kitchen. The sign out front had lost 2 of its letters sometime in 2019, and nobody had bothered to fix them. It was reliable. The coffee was strong. And on any given Friday evening between 6 and 9, the parking lot belonged to the Desert Ravens, chapter of the Hells Angels Motorcycle Club. Everybody in town knew that. Everybody in 3 counties knew that. So when the young blonde woman stepped out of a beat-up Ford sedan and walked into that parking lot just after 7:15, when the bikes were lined up like a row of iron soldiers and every man inside was eating or drinking or telling the kind, it was a story that got louder with each beer. Nobody expected what happened next. The waitresses, not the highway patrol officer eating pie at the counter 2 stools from the end. Not even Logan Carter, who had lived 52 years on this earth and thought he had stopped being surprised by anything a long time ago. Logan was sitting at the head of the long corner table, the way he always sat back to the wall, facing the door, coffee in his right hand, eyes moving across the room without appearing to move at all. It was a habit he'd developed over 3 decades of riding, of being the kind of man other men watched from the corners of their eyes. His road name was Raven. He had earned it not because of anything dramatic, because of any single event that could be turned into a clean story. He had earned it because Ravens, as the old members used to say, never missed anything. They remembered every face, every road, every insult, every kindness. They circled what mattered and never let it go. Had the kind of presence that made a room organize itself differently when he entered. The men sat up a little straighter. Conversations became slightly more careful. It wasn't fear exactly, or it wasn't only fear. It was the particular weight that came from someone who had made hard decisions for a long time and carried the consequences without complaint. He was the chapter president. Had been for 11 years. After that, he was road captain. Sergeant at arms, suspect who had worked his way in the slow and honest way. He had buried brothers. He had ridden through 7 states in a single week following a casket. He had sat across from lawyers, from judges, from men in very expensive suits who wanted something from him, and he had given them nothing. He did not rattle easily. The moment Decker Walsh's youngest road brother, 29 years old, and built like the kind of trouble that arrived smiling, came through the diner door, with his face doing something complicated, and set down his coffee cup. "What?" Logan said. A question. A demand. Decker stood in the doorway for a second that lasted too long. "Turn on your bike," Decker said. The table went quiet. Whole diner, just the table. 7 men, all of them dialed into Logan the way radio towers dial into a signal. "Thing," Logan repeated. "A woman." Decker cleared his throat. "Rubber." She walked out there, put something on your seat, back to her car. Put something. A ring. Decker looked like a man who had just delivered news he wasn't sure was safe to deliver. Oh. Silver, old-looking. She just placed it there. Like she knew exactly what she was doing. The table stayed quiet. Marcus Webb, who everyone called Tank, and who had been riding with Logan for 19 years, was forked slowly. "Someone left something on your bike," he said. "Lips shaped like they needed careful handling." "Apparently," Logan said. "On purpose?" That's what Decker is telling me. Who is she? Logan looked at Decker. First, Decker shifted his weight. I don't know. Never seen her before. On her car. Just sitting there. Logan stood up. The whole table stood up with him. Automatic, instinctive, of coordination that didn't require a word or a signal. 19 years, 11 years, 6 years, it didn't matter. Sure. The president moved. The chapter moved. They walked outside. Their ring sat on the leather seat of 2018 Heritage Softail, like something placed on an altar. All scratched. Simple band with a tiny engraved pattern on the surface that had worn down so much you could barely make it out. Adam stood 5 feet from his bike and looked at it. He did not touch it right away. The men fanned out around him, not blocking the ring from view. Just present, just there, because that was what they did. A Ford sedan was parked at the far edge of the lot. The windshield, they could see a figure, sitting, not running, not watching them, just sitting there, face turned slightly down like someone who had done the hardest part and was now waiting for whatever came next. Not moving, Marcus said. I can see that, Logan said. No, Logan walked to his bike, over the seat, and looked at that ring for a long moment without touching it, without speaking, and in that stillness something happened to his face that none of the men around him had ever seen before. In 11 years of watching him handle things, tightened. His eyes did something complicated. He reached down very slowly and picked up the ring. Between 2 fingers, the way you hold something fragile, something important, something you are afraid of breaking a second time. Nurse was watching him close enough to notice. You recognize it. It wasn't a question either. Turn the ring over once. He pressed his thumb against the worn engraving on the surface, even though it was almost gone, like he was reading something in Braille. Yeah, he said. Word. Quiet, like it cost him something to say it. Marcus stepped closer. Who is she? Logan looked up from the ring. He looked across the parking lot at the Ford sedan, at the figure sitting inside it, still not moving. I don't know, he said, but I know this ring. He walked to the car alone. The men started to follow, and he held up one hand without turning around. They stopped, because when Logan Carter held up his hand and kept walking, you stopped. He reached the Ford sedan, knocked on the driver's window. Even, patient, the window came down. She was younger than he expected. Late 20s, maybe. Blonde hair pulled back, a few strands loose around her face, and of eyes that had recently been crying but were currently holding themselves together by force of will. Her hands were on the steering wheel even though the car wasn't running. Her knuckles slightly white. She looked at him the way people look at something that is both exactly what they expected and still somehow worse. Logan Carter, she said. That's right. She exhaled. A long, slow breath like she'd been holding it for longer than just this moment. My name is Emily Dawson, she said. I've been looking for you for a long time. Logan held up the ring between them. Emily's eyes went to it, stayed there. My grandmother gave it to me before she died, Emily said. I need to find the man connected to it. She told me if I ever needed help, real help, I should return it to him. She looked up from the ring to Logan's face. She told me exactly why. But she told me that if I found you, understand. Logan looked at the ring. Logan looked at her. Inside, he said. The corner table cleared without being asked. That was how it worked. The chapter didn't need to be told that the president needed space. They redistributed themselves to the counter, to the 2 tables near the window, being watched without crowding. Marcus stayed close. Decker stood near the door. Emily slid into the corner booth across from Logan. A waitress appeared with coffee. Emily wrapped both hands around the mug, even though it was 90 degrees and still warm outside. She wasn't cold. She just needed something to hold. Where do I start, she said. At the beginning, Logan said. Don't leave anything out. Emily nodded slowly. Sure. She set down the mug and looked at the ring, still sitting on the table between them, where Logan had placed it. My grandmother's name was Rose Dawson, Emily said. She lived her whole life in Tucson, except for a few years when she was young. Died 8 months ago at 81 years old. She paused. She was the most careful person I've ever known. Everything she kept for reason. So when I found the ring, I knew it wasn't just old jewelry. She had it wrapped in a cloth, in a box, underneath everything else in her closet. It was something she needed to protect. Logan's hands were flat on the table. He was listening with the kind of stillness that meant he was taking in every word and giving nothing back yet. Left me a letter, Emily continued. Handwritten, their pages. She wrote it when she found out she was sick. About a night 25 years ago, anymore when she helped a young man who was in serious trouble. Car accident on a back road outside Tucson. Late at night, was driving home from a nursing shift. She almost didn't stop. Emily's voice tightened slightly. Almost didn't stop because she was tired and she was scared and it was dark. But she stopped. Logan hadn't moved. The man in the accident was badly hurt. She kept him stable until the ambulance came. But that's not the part that mattered. According to her letter, Emily took a breath. The part that mattered was what she found in his jacket when she was checking for ID. Wallet. And inside that wallet was something that people had found it that night would have destroyed his life. She didn't explain exactly what it was. She said only that she made a choice. She kept it. She protected him from it. And she made sure he walked away from that night without that weight following him. Logan's jaw was working slowly, like he was chewing words he hadn't decided whether to say yet. Pressed forward. She wrote that the young man's last name was Carter, and that his older brother had found her the next day to thank her. Older brother gave her a ring from his own hand and told her if she ever needed anything at all, the ring would mean something to his family. She could come to them. Emily looked directly at Logan now. She never used it. She never needed to. She put it in a box and she kept it for over 20 years. And when she gave it to me, right before she died, she said, Emily, I hope you never need to use this. But if you do, find that man and remind him of what it means. The diner was quiet enough that you could hear the highway outside. Logan picked up the ring. He turned it over once, set it down again. And he said one word. And in that word, there was an entire history. Emily nodded. I believe that was his name. Ryan Carter. Logan's voice came out different now, or in a way that wasn't softer. My brother. Yes. He was 22, Logan said. That night, he was 22 years old, and he'd been working a harvest job up near Marana. He was driving home on that back road because he stopped. Something moved across his face, because I told him not to take the highway at night, to stay on the back roads. Silence. He never told me the full story, Logan said finally. What she found in his jacket. She didn't put it in the letter either, Emily said carefully. You know what it was? Logan said it flat, and even there's like a statement about weather. I don't need it in the letter. I know what he was carrying that night. He looked at the ring. Could have used that against him, against us. Could have used it for something. She just kept it. She said in the letter that she'd met enough scared young men in her career to know the difference between bad people and people who made bad choices, Emily said. She said Ryan seemed like the second kind. Logan closed his eyes for exactly 3 seconds. Open them. What do you need? He said. And that was when Emily's carefully held composure showed its first crack. The grandmother's house, she said. The property she left me. There's a man, a developer. His name is Gerard Hollins, who has been trying to take it. He's been claiming there's a lien on the property that doesn't exist. He's been filing paperwork, sending people to pressure me. They're showing up through lawyers who keep telling me that I have no legal right to it. Her voice was still controlled, but her hands tightened around the coffee mug. 3 weeks ago, someone broke into my apartment. Didn't take anything, just went through her boxes. Documents. The things I kept from her house. Emily looked up. Remember, on the corners, the only things they would have been looking for were documents related to the property. Possibly, she hesitated. Possibly the letter she left me. The table had gotten very quiet again, but for different reasons. Marcus Webb had drifted closer without appearing to. There was very still near the door. Logan looked at Emily for a long moment. How long have you been alone in this? He said. 8 months, she said. Since she died. You've been fighting this alone for 8 months. I didn't know who else to go to. She looked at the ring. I didn't even know if this would work. I didn't know if you were still. I didn't know anything. I just knew I was running out of options, and I remembered what she said, and she stopped. I didn't know what else to do. Logan picked up the ring from the table. There, he turned it once in his fingers. Then he looked around at the men who had quietly redistributed themselves to positions throughout the diner without being asked, men who had been watching her, listening, reading the room with the practiced attention of people who had learned that awareness was survival. There goes first. Marcus gave a single nod. All immediate. He looked at Decker. Decker's expression said the same thing. Looked at the four other men who had moved without fanfare to positions near the walls, the door, and he looked at all of them, and they all said the same thing back without speaking a word. Logan set the ring back on the table, closer to Emily this time. Their mother, he said, used to say that a debt owed to kindness is the only debt that doesn't rot while you carry it. He watched Emily's face, and carrying this one for 27 years. He leaned forward slightly. Everything you know about Gerard Hollins. She talked for 40 minutes. He went cold and nobody touched it. She told him about the property, a quarter-acre lot outside Tucson, with a small house that Rose Dawson had owned outright for 31 years, paid off, no mortgage, no complications. A house where Emily had spent summers as a child. A house that, by any reasonable measure, was hers. About the first letter from Hollins Properties LLC, which arrived 6 weeks after the funeral, claiming a municipal lien from 1,989 that somehow made the property's deed transfer complicated. About the second letter and the third, each one more aggressive than the last. She told him about the lawyer she'd hired, the only one she could afford, who had worked on it for 2 months and then called her one Tuesday morning to say very carefully that he had been approached by a colleague who suggested that this case was more complicated than he'd initially understood. Perhaps it would be in everyone's best interest if Emily considered a settlement. Her lawyer had withdrawn from the case the following week. Told him about Hollins himself, 63 years old, developer who had been building in the Tucson area for 20 years, well-connected, on 2 county boards. His name on the side of a community center. The kind of man who showed up in newspaper photos standing next to politicians, displaying the particular smile of someone who has learned that public goodwill is a currency you can spend when you need it. Told him about the man who had come to her apartment, not breaking in, knocking politely, and introducing himself as representing Hollins Properties, and explaining in friendly, reasonable language that continued resistance to the settlement offer was going to become increasingly difficult and inconvenient for her. He used those exact words, Emily said. Increasingly difficult and inconvenient. When was this? Logan said. 9 days ago, and the break-in was before that. 3 weeks ago. Logan looked at Marcus. Marcus looked at Decker. Something moved between the three of them that wasn't a conversation but carried the weight of one. You have the letter your grandmother wrote you? Logan said. I brought copies of everything, okay? Logan stood up. Stay here. He walked away from the table to the far corner of the diner where it was quiet, got out his phone, and made a call that lasted 4 minutes. The men at the table watched him without watching him, a particular skill that everyone at that corner to table had developed over years of needing to pay attention without appearing to pay attention. Then came back, he sat down, and he looked at Emily and he said, Side, I know a man who knows property law in this state better than any lawyer you're going to find at an affordable rate. He's going to take your case, and he's going to take it for free, not because I'm intimidating him into it, but because he owes me an honest favor, and he's going to be interested in this situation. He picked up his coffee, realized it was cold, set it down again. But that's secondary. Emily stared at him. Primary. The lien, Logan said. A lien from 1,989 on property owned since 1,993. That timeline is wrong. That lien, if it's real, would have had to be attached before your grandmother bought the property, which means it should have been dealt with at the time of purchase and cleared, or it's not real. Either there's a filing error that Hollins is exploiting, or, or there's a document that's been fabricated. Emily was looking at him with an expression that had a question in it. They're Danny, Logan said. Used to work property records for Pima County. He's retired now, but he still has relationships with people in the office. He looked at Emily steadily. To know. When that lien was filed, I want to see the original documentation. I want to know who filed it. You think it's fabricated. I think a man who has been building in this county for 20 years and has his name on a community center has had 20 years and a community center's worth of time to build relationships with people who can their paperwork look real. He said it without drama. A man naming weather patterns. It wouldn't be the first time. Emily was quiet for a moment. Why are you doing this? Logan looked at her. I mean, the ring. I know what it represents. She stopped. You don't know me. You have your own things to deal with. Oh, what you risk. Just by your grandmother protected my brother, Logan said. She protected him when she didn't have to. She protected him from something that could have ended his life as he knew it. And she kept that quiet for 27 years. Never asked for anything. Used it. Just carried it. He looked at the ring on the table between them. And then when she was dying and she finally asked for help, she asked for it for you. He was quiet for a second. A person you leave alone in a parking lot. Emily's composure broke. Dramatically, she didn't cry. She just sat back slightly. And for a moment, her face did something that was not crying, but was adjacent to it, the expression of someone who has been holding something very heavy for a very long time and has just been told that they are allowed to put it down. Oh, she said. It came out quiet. Don't thank me yet, Logan said. I don't know what we're dealing with. But they were about to find out. 40 minutes later, as the group was still sitting in that diner and Logan was going through the copies of documents, Emily had brought in from her car the deed, lien notice, the lawyer's letters, the settlement offer. His phone rang. Up at the screen, Danny Carter, his brother, answered on the second ring. That was fast, Logan said. Hello, begin. Danny's voice was tight in a way that Logan had not heard from his younger brother in a long time. A couple of calls about that lien. Ask my contact in the office to pull the original filing. And a pause. Again, the lien was filed in February of this year. February of this year, there's not 1,989. Danny's voice dropped. The filing has been backdated. There's stamped 1,989 in the record system, but the original document was created in February. Contact spotted the metadata on the digital file when she pulled it. Another pause. Then, someone altered a county record. The diner was very loud in the background glasses. Conversation, the highway outside. But at the table, a small pocket of air around Logan and Emily, and the document spread between them. It was completely silent. Logan looked up at Emily. The lien is fraudulent, he said. Emily stared at him. That's not the problem, he said. The problem is someone went to the trouble of falsifying a county record to create it, which means Gerard Hollins or someone working for him has a contact inside the county records office. He set his phone face down on the table, which means this isn't just a property dispute. Marcus was leaning against the counter 6 feet away, and he caught the shift in Logan's posture, the slight change that meant the situation had just become something different from what it was 30 seconds ago. What do we do? Emily said. Logan was quiet for exactly long enough to make it clear he was choosing his next words deliberately. Find out how deep it goes, he said, and we make sure that when it comes to light, and it is going to come to light, it comes to light in the right way. He looked at the ring on the table, but then he picked it up and held it out to Emily. Keep this, he said. Your grandmother kept it for 27 years. That's not a ring you leave on a motorcycle seat. Emily took it slowly. She held it in her closed fist for a moment. And somewhere in the parking lot of Edna's roadside kitchen on Route 9, summer evening that had started quiet and mean and ordinary, turned into something else entirely. Promise that had waited 27 years had just been called home. And the men who rode under the banner of the Desert Ravens were going to find out that some debts, when you finally pay them, turn out to be worth more than you ever imagined when you first incurred them. Was not a man who panicked easily. He had spent 22 years working in county records. He had processed tens of thousands of documents. He had seen filing errors, clerical mistakes, missing signatures, wrong parcel numbers. He had seen the slow, grinding incompetence of bureaucracy up close and personal, and he had learned to take most of it in stride. But his voice on that phone call had been tight. And Logan knew his brother's voice better than he knew almost any sound in the world. He knew the difference between the tightness of surprise and the tightness of fear. What he'd heard in Danny's voice was the second one. Then set the phone down and spent exactly 3 seconds looking at the documents spread across the table, the lien notice, settlement offer, the letters from Hollins Properties LLC, and in those 3 seconds, he reorganized everything he thought he understood about Emily Dawson's situation. Property dispute was one thing. Falsified county records were something else. "Well, I need to make another call," Logan said to Emily. "Stay here, Logan." Marcus fell into step beside him before he'd gone 2 feet. "To me." Logan walked them both to the far end of the diner, the restroom hallway, where the noise from the kitchen gave them a pocket of privacy. Marcus everything Danny had said in 30 seconds flat. Marcus listened without interrupting, which was one of the things Logan valued most about him. Potted trust information, the way good mechanics processed engine problems quietly, early, without drama. When Logan finished, Marcus said, "Hollins has someone inside the county office. That's what it looks like, which means he's done this before." Logan looked at him. "He builds the infrastructure to falsify county records for one property," Marcus said. "A tool you build because you plan to use it more than once." It was the same thought Logan had already arrived at. Hearing it out loud from Marcus made it land differently. "Heavier. She's not the first," Logan said. "Probably not. Which means if we go at this quietly and just fix her situation, someone else is already in it," Marcus finished. "Or will be." Logan pulled out his phone and made the second call. This one went to a man named Victor Reyes, who was not a member of the Desert Ravens, but had been adjacent to their world long enough that certain kinds of trust had been established. Victor had spent 8 years as an investigative journalist for a Tucson paper before the paper downsized, and Victor went independent. He was careful, thorough, and he had exactly the kind of relationship with public records that Logan needed right now. Victor picked up on the third ring. "Logan Carter, calling me on a Friday night," Victor said. "I be excited or worried?" "Depends on your appetite," Logan said. "Something that might be a story. I'm always hungry." "Is it?" "Falsified county lien record. Developer named Gerard Hollins. Property outside Tucson. But I think it's bigger than one property." A pause. There's pauses meant he was thinking, not stalling. "Hollins," Victor said. "Community center guy. That's the one. He's been on my radar for about a year. I think I could pin down." "What kind of radar?" "The kind where 3 different property owners in the southeast part of the county told me versions of the same story about being pressured to sell. I had no documentation, no paper trail, nothing I could build with." Another pause. "Telling me you have paper. I'm telling you I have metadata on a backdated lien that my brother's contact pulled from the digital records system tonight." Victor Reyes was quiet for exactly 4 seconds. "Logan," he said, "I need to meet with you. I know you do. Tomorrow morning." Tonight. Logan looked at his watch. Across the diner at Emily, who was sitting at the corner table with her hands wrapped around a fresh cup of coffee that one of the waitresses had brought her, watching him the way a person watches someone who has just told them not to worry while clearly being worried. "Maybe 2 hours," Logan said. "I'll be at your place." Logan hung up and went back to the table. Emily looked up at him, and the question on her face was plain enough to read without words. "But the lien is fabricated," Logan said, sitting down across from her. "I already knew that, but what matters now is that fabricating a county record isn't something you do once on a whim. I built a system for this, which means your grandmother's house might not be the only property Hollins has targeted this way." Emily stared at him. "You think he's done this to other people?" "I think it's likely." "And nobody caught it?" "You caught it. Because you fought back." Logan looked at her steadily. "People in your position Don't fight back. They take the settlement. They're exhausted. They're grieving. They're up against lawyers they can't afford to match. Honors. And they take whatever's offered and they walk away. And if you do that, there's no record to pull. There's no question asked. Property changes hands, and Hollins builds something on it, and the story disappears. Emily was quiet for a long moment. My grandmother left me that house, she said. It's not worth a lot of money. It's a valuable piece of land. I know that. She looked down at the ring in her hand. She lived in that house for 30 years. I used to visit her there every summer. I know every room. I know which step on the back porch squeaks and which cabinet in the kitchen sticks when it rains. Her voice stayed even, just barely. He's not getting that house. No, Logan said. He's not. He said it the way you say something when you mean it all the way down. Emily looked at him. And for the first time since she'd sat down in that booth, in her expression eased. Not all the way. Enough. Decker appeared at Logan's shoulder. Everything okay? Starting to be, Logan said. I need you to find out everything publicly available on Hollins. County filings, property transactions, anything recorded with the county in the last 10 years. But use legitimate sources. I want a picture of how he operates. Decker nodded and moved away, already pulling out his phone. Marcus pulled a chair up to the end of the table and sat down without being invited, which was his way of saying he was in this now, and they all knew it. You said your lawyer withdrew, Marcus said to Emily. Yes. Do you know who approached him? The colleague he mentioned? Emily shook her head. He wouldn't tell me. He just said it had become complicated. Lawyers don't withdraw from a simple property case because it's complicated, Marcus said. Or because someone convinced them it was going to cost them something to stay in it. Emily absorbed this. You think someone threatened him? I think someone communicated the cost of continuing, Marcus said. A polite version of threatening him. That's witness tampering, Emily said. The words came out careful, like she was testing their weight. Prove it, Marcus said. Yes. Can we? Logan and Marcus looked at each other. It depends on what your lawyer is willing to, Logan said. Right now, he's not going to say anything because he's scared. He thought for a moment. If the larger picture becomes clear enough, if Hollins's operation starts coming apart from other directions, your lawyer might feel safer talking. People tend to get brave when they stop being the only one willing to stand up. Emily nodded slowly. What do we do right now? Right now, Logan said, I go back to your apartment alone. Emily went still. The break-in was 3 weeks ago, Logan said. The visit from Hollins's man was 9 days ago. You said nothing has happened since then, but that's not because they've stopped. It's because they're waiting to see if you're going to keep pushing. He leaned forward slightly. You pushed tonight. You found me, which means you escalated. Notice, how would they know I found you? They might not. He held her gaze. But if things start moving, if records get pulled, a journalist starts making phone calls, if their falsified lien starts getting examined, it won't take them long to trace the timing back to this evening. He paused. Where were you planning to stay tonight? My apartment. Is there somewhere else you can go? And you trust? Emily thought about it. The hesitation before she answered told Logan enough about the size of her support network. Sarah, we work together. She's offered before. Call her. You really think? I think Gerard Hollins has already sent someone to your apartment once and sent a man to your door once, Logan said. I don't think he's running out of patience yet, but I think if he figures out you've stopped being alone in this, the timeline is going to accelerate. Logan's voice stayed even and factual, not dramatic, because Emily didn't need drama right now. She needed information she could use, stay somewhere else for a few days, announce where. Emily picked up her phone from the table. She looked at it for a second, and then she looked up at Logan. Can I ask you something? Go ahead. 27 years, she said. Honors, you've been carrying this for 27 years. Her? A debt to a woman you never really knew. You never tried to find her, find out what happened to her. The question hung there. Logan was quiet for a moment that stretched a little longer than his usual pauses. Right, he said. About 12 years ago, after my brother told me more of the story, Looked for a Rose Dawson in Tucson. Didn't find the right one. Or she may have moved, may have married and changed her name. He looked at the ring on the table. I figured if she needed us, she knew how to find us. If she never came, maybe it meant things had worked out for her. He paused. Myself that. But you kept thinking about it. I kept thinking about it, he said. Yes. Emily nodded slowly. She looked at the ring for a moment. Then she slid it across the table to Logan. Keep it for now, she said. Grandmother gave it to you the first time. Maybe it should stay with you until this is done. Logan looked at the ring. He slid it back to Emily. No, he said. She gave it to you to use. You used it. It stays with you now. He sat back. But what you can give me is every document in your car and your grandmother's house. Everything she left behind. Because if Hollins has been looking for something, if they broke into your apartment looking for something specific, we need to find it before they do. Emily was already nodding. I have boxes. At my apartment. Her things. I packed everything I could after the break-in because I didn't want to leave it there. We need to go through all of it, Logan said. Tonight. Emily called her friend Sarah. Marcus made 3 phone calls Logan didn't ask about, but understood logistics, positioning the quiet machinery of the club organizing itself around a problem the way it had organized itself around problems for 30 years. Came back from his phone and his laptop with a notepad covered in writing. Hollins Properties LLC, Decker said, setting the notepad on the table. Old 2003. Primary business is residential and commercial development in Pima County. 14 properties currently under development or completed in the last 5 years. He tapped the notepad. I cross-referenced the addresses against county property transfer records from the last 10 years. 4 of those 14 properties changed hands under what looked like distressed sales. Go prices. Short timelines. All of them in the southeast quadrant of the county. Marcus leaned over and looked at the list. Then looked at it. Emily looked at it, and something moved across her face. My grandmother's house is in the southeast part of the county, she said. I know, Decker said. So he's built a pattern, Logan said. Small properties, not high profile. Owners who are elderly or dealing with estates, or both. Decker's voice stayed neutral, but the line of his mouth wasn't. People who are already in a hard place. The table was quiet for a moment. Properties, Marcus said. 4 people who took the settlement. At least 4 that I can find tonight, Decker said. There might be more. Some of these transfers are clean on the surface. I need Victor to dig deeper into the filing histories. He's meeting us tonight, Logan said. That list. Victor Reyes arrived at Logan's place just after 10:30. He was a thin man in his mid-40s with reading glasses perpetually pushed up on his forehead and the particular kind of focus in his eyes that came from spending years learning to find the thing that other people had worked hard to hide. He shook hands with Logan and Marcus. He looked at Emily with the careful, assessing look of a man who was deciding how much of a story he was sitting across from. Tell me your name and tell me exactly what happened, he said. The beginning, Emily told him. Victor didn't take notes while she talked. He listened, which was actually a better sign. People who took notes while you talked were recording information. People who listened were building understanding. When she finished, there was quiet for a moment. The metadata, he said to Logan. Your brother's contact, she's willing to talk. Off the record, oh, I can work with that. I need to verify it independently before I can publish anything. Victor looked at the documents Decker had printed. These 4 properties, I want to run them myself. Reference against the lien records. He looked at Decker's notepad. Everything you found tonight? First pass, Decker said. It's a good first pass. Victor looked at Logan. If what you're describing is real, a systematic falsification of county property records to force distressed sales, this is not a small story. This is a criminal enterprise that's been operating in plain sight. He paused. And the reason it's been operating in plain sight is because every individual piece of it looked like a private property dispute, small enough to ignore, small enough to settle. Nobody was connecting the dots until now, Logan said. Now, Victor looked at Emily. You should know that when I start pulling on this, someone is going to know someone is pulling. It won't happen immediately. It will happen. And if he has a contact inside the county office, he'll hear about the records being accessed, Emily said. Actually, yes. So the clock gets shorter. The clock gets shorter, Victor confirmed. Emily was quiet for a moment. She looked at Logan. How long do we have? Enough, Logan said. You don't know that. No, he said. We don't need forever. We need enough time to pull the documentation together and get it in front of the right people so that if Hollins makes a move on you, already under scrutiny. He looked at Victor. Asked, can you verify the metadata issue independently? 48 hours if my contact in the county assessor's office is willing to move. Victor was already looking at his phone. Gonna love me calling on a Friday night. Tell her what it's about, Marcus said. It might move faster than you think. Victor stood up. I'll start tonight. I'll call you both in the morning. He looked at Emily one more time, the assessing look returning. Ms. Dawson, I want you to understand something. Sir? Right now, this story protects you because it's still hidden. The moment it's public, you become the name attached to it. Gerard Hollins has lawyers and money and 20 years of goodwill built in this community. But you ready for that? Emily didn't flinch. He took something that belonged to my grandmother, she said. He had to take it from me. And if he did it to 4 other people, there are 4 other families who lost something and never knew why. She met Victor's eyes. I'm ready. Victor nodded once. I'll be in touch. And he left. The room was quieter after he was gone. Not uncomfortable, just the specific quiet of people recalibrating after a lot of information has moved through a space. Victor stood up and stretched. I'm going to make some calls. Find out if any of the people who sold in those 4 transfers are still in the area. If any of them would talk. Carefully, Logan said. Always. Marcus pulled on his jacket. I'll check in at midnight. When Marcus left, there was just Logan and Emily and Decker, who was still at the table going through documents with the focused, unhurried attention of someone who knew that details mattered and wasn't going to rush the finding of them. Emily was looking at a photograph she had pulled from one of the folders she'd brought in from her car. On the table facing Logan, an old photograph, developed film, not digital. 2 people standing in front of a small house, a woman in her 50s, gray-haired, smiling, and a young girl, maybe 7 or 8, standing beside her, squinting into the sun. Her grandmother and me, Emily said. Outside the house. That was the summer I turned 8. She looked at the photograph for a moment. She used to make biscuits on Saturday mornings. Real ones, from scratch. She'd wake up early. And by the time I came downstairs, the whole house smelled like butter and flour. She paused. When I think about that house, the property value, not the square footage. She picked up the photograph. I think about Saturday mornings. Logan looked at the photograph, but he didn't say anything immediately because some things don't need a response. They need a witness. After a moment, he said, we're going to make sure those Saturday mornings belong to you. Emily nodded. She put the photograph back in the folder carefully. Look. Then Decker looked up from his papers and said quietly, with the tone of someone who has just found something they weren't looking for. Both Logan and Emily looked at him. Decker turned one of the documents around so they could both see it. It was one of the property transfer records he'd printed earlier in the evening. The 4 distressed sales. This property, Decker said, the Hollins Properties in 2019. Previous owner was a 74-year-old woman named Margaret Flores for $62,000. County assessment at the time was $148,000, less than half the assessed value, Emily said. Her? Yeah, Decker tapped the bottom of the page. I ran her name. Flores passed away in March 2020. Her family filed a complaint with the county in 2021 claiming the sale had been made under duress. The complaint was reviewed and dismissed. He paused. The complaint was reviewed by a county official named P. Hartwell. Logan was very still. P. Hartwell, Logan said. Prescia Hartwell, Decker said. She's been with the county assessor's office for 16 years. He set the paper down. She's the person who manages the digital property records system. The room went completely quiet. Emily looked from Decker to Logan. She's the contact, she said. His contact inside the county. Looks that way, Decker said. A person who reviewed and dismissed the Flores family complaint is the person who controls the record system where your grandmother's lien was backdated, Logan said, slowly letting each piece of it land. That's not a coincidence. That's the system, Emily said. That's the system, Logan confirmed. He picked up his phone and called Victor Reyes back. Victor answered on the second ring. I know it's only been 20 minutes, Logan said. I have a name for you. Patricia Hartwell. County Assessor's Office. Record System Administrator. He waited to beat. She dismissed the Flores family complaint in 2021. On the other end of the line, Reyes went very quiet. Then he said Logan interviewed Patricia Hartwell 2 years ago for a piece about county records digitization. Professional, knew the system cold. Another pause. She mentioned at one point that she was planning to retire early. A house she was building outside the county. The words came out careful. Of his house. Paid for how? Logan said. I asked at the time, Victor said. I'm asking now. Logan hung up. I was watching him. Emily was watching him. Neither of them spoke. Sat back in his chair and looked at the ceiling for exactly 2 seconds, which was how he thought when he needed to think fast. Bigger than we thought, he said. How much bigger? Emily asked. Logan looked at her. Hollins didn't just build a system to target 1 or 2 properties, he said. A relationship with someone inside the county infrastructure. Someone who could make records say what he needed them to say, dismiss complaints that got too close, and give him advance notice if someone started investigating. He set his hands flat on the table. Has been running for years. The 4 properties Decker found tonight are probably the visible surface of something much deeper. Emily was quiet, and Patricia Hartwell is in the middle of it. She's the mechanism, Logan said. Hollins is the architect. She's how he builds. So when Victor starts pulling on the lien record, Hartwell will know, Logan said. Because she controls the system anyone would have to access to verify it. He looked at Decker, which means we need to move faster than we planned. Decker was already nodding. Orders. Victor needs to come at this from outside the county system. He needs independent verification. Something that doesn't run through Hartwell's office. The metadata my brother's contact pulled, Logan said, already in our hands. Victor needs to establish a chain of documentation that doesn't touch the county system until we're ready to go public. He stood up, which means the 48 hours I told Emily we had might be 24. Emily absorbed this. She did not look scared. She looked like a person who has just understood the full size of the thing they've stepped into and has decided that understanding it is better than not understanding it. What do you need from me? She said. Everything in those boxes, Logan said. Right. Whatever your grandmother kept, whatever she documented, if she was careful enough to protect Ryan with a ring and a secret for 27 years, I'd have been careful enough to document more than just the ring. Emily stared at it. Something changed on her face. Something shifted behind her eyes. The recollection arriving late and arriving hard. The box under the bed, she said. Box. When I packed up her house after she died, there was a box under her bed that I didn't open. I just put it with the others. Assumed it was old clothes, old papers. She stopped. My grandmother never kept anything under her bed. She was particular about that. She said things stored out of sight got lost. Her voice had changed. It was faster now, sharper. She kept everything in the closet or on shelves. Organized. Labeled. She looked at Logan. She put something under her bed deliberately. Wanted it hidden but not gone. Logan looked at her for a long moment. What are those boxes, he said. Storage unit, Emily said. In my apartment. Logan looked at Marcus, who had just walked back in through the front door. Marcus read the room in about 3 seconds. Tell me where, Marcus said. Went that night. Because 27 years is a long time to carry something, and sometimes the thing being carried is heavier than anyone knows until they finally set it down and see exactly what they've been holding. The storage unit was a 10 by 10 box that smelled like old paper and cedar. Emily had rented it the week after the funeral, when she wasn't ready to sort through her grandmother's life, but couldn't leave it sitting in a house she wasn't sure she'd be allowed to keep. She had carried 41 boxes from Rose Dawson's house to this unit. numbered them in marker on the sides, and told herself she'd come back when she was ready. Hadn't been ready until tonight. Marcus pulled back the rolling door, and the three of them stood there. Logan, Marcus, Emily, looking at the stacked boxes in the small overhead light. Nobody said anything for a moment. Not because there was nothing to say, but because the room had a particular kind of weight that came from someone's entire life compressed into cardboard. Room boxes, Emily said. I labeled them B. She moved to the back left corner and Marcus helped her shift the front stacks without being asked. Working efficiently, no wasted motion. Logan stood at the edge and watched the room the way he watched every room exits. Angles, what could be seen from the door. There were 6 boxes labeled B. Emily opened the first one. Books, mostly. A Bible with a cracked spine. Collection of Reader's Digests going back to the 1980s. There were 3 novels with library stamps that were probably overdue by about 30 years. Box. Clothes. Folded carefully the way Rose Dawson apparently folded everything. Box. Picture frames wrapped in newspaper. Emily unwrapped one, and her hands slowed for just a second when she saw the face inside it, and then she set it down gently and kept moving. 4th box. Linens. Folded with the same precision as the clothes. Box. Emily opened the flaps and stopped. Logan, she said. He was beside her before she finished saying his name. The box was not full of linens or books or clothes. It contained 3 things. A manila envelope, sealed with tape that had yellowed with age. A small notebook with a green cover, the kind you could buy at any drugstore, pearl-bound. And underneath both of those, wrapped in a piece of flannel cloth, the way the ring had been wrapped, a cassette tape in a plastic case with a handwritten label. Emily's hands were very still over the box. She reached in and picked up the notebook first, opened it to the first page, and read the first line. Then she looked up at Logan, and her expression was something he hadn't seen on her face yet. Not fear, not relief. Something older than both. She kept a record, Emily said. What? Emily turned the notebook so Logan could see. Rose Dawson's handwriting, small and precise, covered every page. Dates on the left margin, notes beside each date, names, details. The first entry was dated April 3rd, 997. She started keeping this in 9,997, Emily said. She turned a few pages. The entries continued. 1,998, 999, 2003. Some years had only 2 or 3 entries. Some had pages of them. What was she documenting? Logan looked at the dates, at the names appearing in the margins. He reached over and turned carefully to the last few pages, and he read what was written there. He read it without moving for a long moment. Then he said, really quietly, she was documenting Gerard Hollins. Emily stared at him. She knew, Emily said. The words came out like something that had been underwater for a long time and had just reached the surface. She knew about him. It looks like she'd been watching him for years, Logan said. He was reading as he spoke. She documented property transactions. She wrote down names of people she'd heard were pressured to sell. She tracked public record county assessments, deed transfers. She wrote about complaints she'd heard from neighbors. He looked up. Your grandmother was a retired nurse living in southeast Tucson, and she spent 20 years quietly documenting a man she believed was preying on people in her community. Marcus was reading over Logan's shoulder now. It was tight. She documented 4 properties herself, Marcus said. Different names from the ones Decker found tonight. These are earlier 2004, 2007, 2011, he pointed. She wrote a note here, spoke to Eleanor Chang. Eleanor says she was told her house had structural violations that would cost more to fix than the property was worth. It arrived unannounced. Property sold to Hollins Properties 6 weeks later. Marcus set the notebook down carefully. She was building a case. By herself, Emily said. Alone. By herself, Logan confirmed. Alone. The 3 of them stood around that box and absorbed what it meant. Rose Dawson, in her small house in southeast Tucson, with her Saturday morning biscuits and her careful folding and her decades-old nursing instincts for noticing when something was wrong with someone, had seen what was happening in her neighborhood and had done the only thing available to her. She had written it down. She had named names. She had tracked dates and dollar amounts, and the particular language that recurred each time: structural violations, liens, settlement offers, silence. She had done it for 20 years and never told anyone. There was no one to tell, until now. Emily reached into the box and picked up the manila envelope. She looked at the tape, sealing it for just a moment. Then she peeled it open carefully and pulled out the contents. Paragraphs, 12 of them, printed on regular paper, kind you'd print from a home computer. Some showed men in suits standing outside houses. Some showed vehicles, the same dark SUV, appearing in multiple photos in front of different properties. Soup. Two showed a man Emily didn't recognize going into what appeared to be a county building. Last three showed a meeting taken from a distance, slightly blurry, but clear enough, between two men sitting at an outdoor table at what looked like a restaurant. And picked up the last photograph. He looked at it for a long time. "Lens," he said, pointing to the man on the left. He didn't need to have met the man to recognize him. Decker had found enough news photos that evening to make the face familiar. A set, 60-something, the particular well-maintained look of a man who lunches with politicians. And to the man on the right. "I don't know him," Logan said. Pierce leaned in. He looked at the photograph, and then Marcus Webb, who had been riding beside Logan Carter for 19 years and who had one of the best memories of anyone Logan had ever met. "I do." Logan looked at him. "That's Tom Beller," Marcus said. "He was Pima County Commissioner for District 4 until about 3 years ago." "Was?" "He didn't run for re-election." Tired suddenly. Marcus looked at the photograph again. There was something in the paper about it. Nothing specific. Just that he was stepping back for personal reasons. He tapped the edge of the photo. "This is dated on the back." Emily flipped it over. In Rose's handwriting, October 14, 2018. "That's 14 months before Bella retired," Logan said. "No." Marcus looked at Logan. He wasn't the only elected official in Hollins's pocket. "You don't know that yet," Logan said. "Oh," Marcus said. "But I know that a county commissioner doesn't have lunch with a developer and fade from public life 14 months later without a reason. And I know Rose Dawson didn't take this photo by accident." Logan looked at the cassette tape still in the box. The handwritten label was faded but legible. It read, "For Emily, when the time comes." Nobody moved for a moment. Emily reached in and picked it up. She held it in both hands and looked at it the way you look at something you're not sure you're ready to open. The plastic case had a small crack on one corner. The tape inside looked intact. "She knew she was going to leave this for you," Logan said. "She prepared this deliberately. Everything in this box was meant for you to find." "She never told me," Emily said. "The time she was sick, in all the conversations we had, she never mentioned any of this." "She was protecting you," Logan said. I looked at him. "As long as she was alive, it was her risk to carry," Logan said. "She didn't want you in it until she couldn't protect you herself." He paused. "She made sure you had everything you'd need when the time came." Emily looked down at the cassette tape. It's like she was holding it so carefully it was almost like she was afraid it would break. Or maybe she was afraid of what was on it. Sometimes a truth you've been circling for months gets very loud when you're finally close enough to hear it clearly. "We need to find something to play this on," she said. "I know exactly where," Logan said. They locked up the storage unit at 11:40 and drove to Danny Carter's house. Logan had called ahead. Danny met them at the door in pajama pants and a flannel shirt. Told Logan that his brother had been awake thinking about this all evening and had only recently given up on looking presentable. Danny was 50 years old and looked like a quieter version of Logan's same strong jaw, an economy of movement, but where Logan carried his history in his face like weather, Danny carried his more carefully, closer in. He had spent most of his adult life being Ryan Carter's older brother, who happened to be Logan's younger brother, and the position had given him a particular talent for reading rooms that other people had already reorganized before he arrived. He looked at Emily in the doorway, and he went very still. Logan said, "This is Emily Dawson, Rose Dawson's granddaughter." Danny didn't say anything for a moment. He looked at Emily the way people sometimes look at the child of someone who changed their life searching for the ghost of the person they remembered in a face that was entirely new. And Danny said, not to Emily, to himself almost. She did, Logan said. Danny stepped back and opened the door wider. "Come in," he said, "please." Danny had a cassette player in a box in his garage, a relic from a tape collection he'd never fully digitized that Logan had made fun of for 15 years and was now profoundly grateful for. He found it in 4 minutes, which meant he knew exactly where it was. But some things don't get thrown away, even when you tell yourself they will. In Danny's kitchen, Danny plugged in the player. Emily held the cassette for a moment before putting it in. It hit the label one more time. For Emily, when the time comes. Put the tape in, she pressed play. A brief hiss of static, then a voice. It was the voice of a woman who had spent decades being careful and measured and precise. A voice that knew how to deliver difficult news because it had done so many times in hospital rooms and had learned that the best kindness was clarity. Rose Dawson's voice said, "Emily, if you're listening to this, it means the time has come, and it also means you found the ring. I want you to know first that I'm not sorry for keeping this from you. A right to a life that wasn't complicated by my choices. I need you to know everything now, so here it is." The kitchen was completely silent except for the tape. First noticed what Hollins was doing in 2004. Rose's voice said, "My neighbor Dolores sold her house that year. She'd lived next door to me for 9 years. She had 3 grown children and 6 grandchildren, and she cried when she signed the papers because she didn't want to leave. But she said there were problems with the property code violations. A lien she hadn't known about, and fixing them would have cost more than she had. So she sold for 40% of what the house was worth." A pause. "I went to see Dolores 3 months after she moved. She was in a 2-room apartment 20 miles from her family. She didn't understand what had happened to her. She just knew she'd lost something she couldn't get back." Emily's hands were flat on the table. She was not moving. "I started paying attention after Dolores," Rose's voice continued. I started asking questions, carefully, because I understood early on that whoever was behind what happened to Dolores had connections in the county office and connections with lawyers, and that asking the wrong questions too loudly was going to get me nowhere. The voice was steady, unhurried, a woman who had made peace with every word she was saying. I documented what I found. I kept records, because that's what nurses do. We create a record so that the truth can be recovered even if memory fails. Logan and Marcus were both very still. "I found evidence of at least 12 properties," Rose's voice said. 12. Not 4, not the 4 Decker had found, not the 4 Rose had documented in the notebook. 12. Marcus looked at Logan. Logan didn't look back because he was listening, and he didn't want to miss a word. "Documented 12 properties over 20 years, Rose's voice said. 12 families. 12 houses sold under pressure, sold for less than they were worth. Sold because someone created a problem that didn't exist and then offered to make it go away for a price." Her voice stayed even, but something moved underneath it. Most of those families were elderly. Most of them were Latino or Black. Some of them were on fixed incomes and couldn't afford a lawyer and didn't know that the problem they were being told about wasn't real. A pause. Sellers was 82 years old when she signed those papers. Now, she never got her house back. She never knew why it really happened. The tape hissed softly between sentences. "There's a woman named Patricia Hartwell who works in the county assessor's office," Rose's voice said. "I believe she is the mechanism by which the records are altered. I have a photograph of her meeting with Hollins in 2018. I have notes from a conversation I had with a former county records clerk named Samuel Orozco in 2019 that he had been asked by Hartwell to backdate a filing. I refused and he resigned. He may be willing to talk if someone finds him, and he feels safe enough." Emily closed her eyes for a moment. Orozco, a name, a witness who had walked away because there was no one to walk toward. "Well, now, the cassette was the safest way to do this," Rose's voice said. "Documents can be taken. Letters can be read. A tape in a box under a bed in a house belonging to an old woman is something people underestimate. The voice carried something close to dry humor at that. I need you to find the right people, Emily. Not just a lawyer, and not just the police, because both of those paths run through channels that Hollins has had time to influence. You need someone outside those channels, someone who operates by their own code and has no reason to be afraid of Gerard Hollins. A pause. I left you the ring for that reason. If you found the man connected to it, and if he was who I believed him to be when I met his brother all those years ago, then you found someone who would help you not because it was profitable or safe, but because it was right. Logan's jaw was tight. I'm sorry I couldn't do more, Rose's voice said. Sorry, I couldn't take this to the finish line myself. I've been watching you your whole life, Emily. Are braver than you know. You have always been braver than you know. A pause. The notebook and the photographs and the name on this tape are the beginning. The rest is yours. I love you. I'm proud of you. Don't let Dolores's house be the end of the story. The tape hissed, and then silence. Nobody in Danny Carter's kitchen said anything for a long moment. Of silence that forms when something has just been said that can't be unsaid and shouldn't be covered over too quickly. But Danny was the one who finally moved. He stood up, turned away from the table for a moment, and did something that he didn't draw attention to, and the other people in the room had the decency to not draw attention to either. Emily had her hands over her face, not crying, or not only crying. The expression behind her hands was the expression of someone who has just understood the full size of something they thought they understood. It was much larger and much older and much heavier than they knew. Let the silence hold until it had done what it needed to do. Then he said Samuel Orozco. Decker, who had been standing near the kitchen door since they arrived, already on his phone. On it. Victor needs to know about the tape, Logan said. Right. I'll call him, Marcus said. Danny. Logan looked at his brother. Danny turned back around. The contact at the county office who found the metadata. Can she also access whether Samuel Orozco ever formally filed anything when he resigned? Any internal complaint, any HR record? Danny was already calculating. She's in the assessor's office, not HR. But she knows people. He picked up his own phone. Almost midnight. I know. She's going to love you for this, Danny said. Child anyway. The next 40 minutes moved fast. Victor answered on the first ring this time he had been awake. Working, pulling at the threads they had given him earlier. When Logan told him about the tape about the notebook, Rose Dawson's 12 properties and the name Samuel Orozco, and went silent for the kind of silence that meant he was recalibrating the entire size of the story. 12 properties, Victor said. That's what she documented. Logan, 12 documented, and she was one woman watching one neighborhood. How many are there total? Logan didn't answer that. And need to. I need to hear that tape, Victor said. Tomorrow morning. Danny's house. 8 o'clock. I'll be there at 7:30. Decker found Samuel Orozco in 20 minutes. He was living in a suburb north of Tucson, still in the area, for a private accounting firm. His phone number was attached to a LinkedIn profile that was 3 years out of date. Wrote down the number and handed it to Logan without comment. Logan looked at the number. He set it on the table. Tell him tonight, he said. He doesn't know us, and we can't explain this in a cold call at midnight. Victor knows how to approach reluctant sources, Marcus said. Then Victor approaches him tomorrow, after he hears the tape. Logan looked at Emily. What are you doing? It was a direct question, and he asked it directly because Emily had been holding herself together with considerable effort for the last 20 minutes, and he didn't want to pretend he hadn't noticed. I'm angry, Emily said. It came out simply, not dramatically. There's just the plain statement of a person who had decided honesty was more useful than composure at this particular moment. Logan said, is it? Anger is useful, he said. It means you're not scared anymore. It means you understand what you're dealing with, and you're ready to deal with it. He looked at her steadily. Your grandmother was angry too. You can hear it in the tape, even when her voice is calm. Underneath every word she said. He paused. She just didn't have anyone to direct it through. She had 20 years of nowhere to put it, Emily said. Corners. And she spent it building something anyway, Logan said. Something that's sitting on Danny's kitchen table right now. Something that is going to matter. He leaned forward. Waste those 20 years. She spent them. Emily absorbed this. Something settled in her expression, not peace exactly. The kind of resolution that comes when you see clearly what needs to be done. Our next move, she said. Before Logan could answer, phone rang. He looked at the screen. Ryan, his younger brother, the man at the center of 27 years of this, at 12:20 in the morning. Logan looked at Danny. Danny looked at the phone. He doesn't know any of this is happening, Danny said quietly. Logan answered. Ryan, he said. Ryan Carter's voice came through tired and slightly rough, the voice of a man who had been asleep and woken by something. Well, sorry to call late. I had I don't know, a feeling that something was happening. He paused. Everything okay? Logan looked around Danny's kitchen. The notebook and photographs on the table, at the cassette player still plugged in beside the sink. Harrison Decker and Danny, all watching him. At Emily Dawson, who was looking at the ring still in her hand. Not yet, Logan said to his brother. Had to be. I need you to come over to Danny's. Right, Ryan. Right now. And I need you to be ready to hear something that's going to change how you understand the last 27 years. A long pause on the line. Ryan said. You're scaring me. Don't be scared, Logan said. What you're going to hear tonight, it's not bad news. Purdue news. He paused. Someone spent her whole life making sure the truth survived. You need to know who she was. Ryan arrived 20 minutes later. He was 49 years old, and he walked through Danny's door with the slightly braced expression of a man who has learned over the course of his life that late night calls from his brothers generally meant something had happened. Looked at the room, Logan, Marcus, Decker, Danny, and a young blonde woman he didn't know sitting at the kitchen table, and he understood that whatever this was, already in motion. He looked at the woman last, looked back at him. She stood up slowly. My name is Emily Dawson, she said. My grandmother's name was Rose Dawson. She was a nurse. She found you on a back road outside Tucson in the fall of 1997, and she stayed with you until the ambulance came. She kept something from your jacket that night to protect you, and she never told anyone, and she never asked for anything in return. Ryan Carter went completely still. A long moment he stood in his brother's kitchen doorway and didn't move and didn't speak. His face did something private and complicated that nobody tried to read or name. I knew someone stopped, he finally said. I was conscious enough to know someone stopped. Then, by the time I was in the ambulance, she was gone. I tried to find her. I know, Emily said. Then tried too. Ryan looked at Logan. Logan gave a small nod and looked back at Emily. She passed away 8 months ago, Emily said. Hers was gentle. She was 81. She was healthy until about 6 months before the end. She wasn't in any pain. She held his gaze. She knew, after she died, that what she'd done for you that night mattered. Talked about it in the letter she left me. She said it was one of the things she was most certain about in her whole life, that stopping was right. Ryan Carter sat down in the chair nearest to him because there was no other reasonable response to what had just been said to him. He put his hands on the table. He looked at them for a moment, and then he said, to no one in particular, and to everyone in the room, 27 years I have thought about that night, the person who stopped, about not knowing who it was, or if they were okay, or whether they ever knew that what they did changed everything. He looked up at Emily. I used to think about it when I was going through a hard time. I would think there was a stranger who stopped for me once. There are people like that in the world. It helped. He paused. Helped a lot of times. Emily reached into her pocket and placed the ring on the table in front of Ryan. Ryan looked at it. He picked it up the way Logan had picked it up in the parking lot, slowly. Their fingers, like something irreplaceable. This was yours, Emily said. Heather gave it to her. She kept it. And she told me to find him if I ever needed help. She looked from Ryan to Logan. Ryan looked at Logan. Logan said, she needed more than help, and she's going to get it. He sat down at the table. I need you to listen to a tape. He pressed play. Rose Dawson's voice filled Danny Carter's kitchen. For the second time that night, Ryan sat. with his hands around the ring and his eyes closed, and he listened to the voice of the woman who had stopped for him on a dark road 27 years ago explain, calmly and clearly, and with every detail she had spent 20 years collecting, exactly what she had seen and what she had done and why she had done it. By the end of it, Marcus was staring at the table. Heather had moved to the far end of the kitchen and was very still. Danny had his arms crossed and his jaw set in the way he said it when he had decided something. And Ryan Carter, the youngest person in the room, the person who had started all of this by driving home on the wrong road on the wrong night and being pulled back from the edge of his own worst mistake by a woman he never got to thank. Ryan Carter set the ring gently on the table and looked at Logan and said the only thing that needed saying. What do we do? Logan looked at every face in that room, at the people who were there because of loyalty and history and the particular weight of an unpaid debt that had been riding alongside them for 27 years. Tomorrow morning, Logan said, Victor Reyes hears this tape, the Kate Samuel Orozco. We verify the 12 properties Rose documented against the county records. We establish a chain of evidence that doesn't run through Patricia Hartwell. He looked at Emily. When we go public, and we are going, public Gerard Hollins won't have enough lawyers in the state of Arizona to contain what's coming. He picked up the ring from the table and set it in Emily's palm and closed her fingers around it. Eric built us a bridge, he said. We're going to walk it. Nobody in that room slept that night. Colorado, and 60 miles away in a house that was considerably larger than anything on Rose Dawson's block, a man named Gerard Hollins was having a drink on his back porch and feeling, the first time in a long time, a faint and inexplicable unease that he could not quite name. He poured another drink. He told himself it was nothing. He was wrong. Victor Reyes arrived at Danny's house at 7:22. There's 8 minutes before he said he would, which told Logan everything about how Victor had spent the night. Well, he had the look of a man who had not slept but had been productive instead of restless, eyes clear, movements quick, a yellow legal pad under his arm already covered in handwriting on both sides. He shook hands with Ryan without being introduced, which meant he already knew who Ryan was, which meant he had spent part of the night doing his own research into the Carter family and had found enough to understand why Ryan's presence mattered. There was thorough. Logan respected thorough. I need to hear the tape first, Victor said. I'll tell you what I found overnight. The sequencing mattered to him and could see that Victor wanted his own findings held separate from the tape until he'd absorbed the tape clean, his own conclusions overlaid on top of it. Journalist instinct. You protected your objectivity even when you were already certain. Danny pressed play. Victor listened to Rose Dawson's voice with his legal pad closed on the table in front of him and his pen set beside it. He did not take notes. He listened with the particular intensity of someone who is memorizing rather than recording, building an internal structure that he would trust more than any external document. When the tape finished, he was quiet for 30 seconds. Then he picked up his pen and wrote one word at the top of the legal pad. He turned it to face the room. The word was systemic. In a case, Victor said, this is a system. And systems have architects and mechanics and beneficiaries, and they have a weight that's much harder to move than any individual case. He looked at Logan. What I found overnight confirms what Rose documented. Us referenced her 12 properties against everything publicly accessible in the county recording system. Then 16, the kitchen went still. 16, Marcus said. 16 properties, 12 that Rose documented. There are additional that I identified independently through a pattern match on sale, price versus assessed value, combined with a Hollins Properties connection in the subsequent title. Victor opened the legal pad now and turned pages. This goes back to 2001. The most recent was 14 months ago. He paused. All of them in the southeast quadrant of the county. All of them elderly owners. All of them sold for between 35 and 60% of assessed value. All of them with a lien or code violation appearing in county records within 6 months of the sale. Ryan was looking at the table. 16 families, he said. 16 that I've found, Victor said. Be precise about that. 16 that I can document so far. The actual number may be higher. Emily had been quiet through Victor's report, sitting with her coffee and her hands and the particular stillness of someone who is processing numbers that represent people. She said. My grandmother mentioned a woman named Dolores. Her neighbor, the first one she noticed. I found her, Victor said. Look at Emily carefully, Dolores Marchetti. She sold in 2004. Away in 2009. Her daughter Maria is still in Tucson. Emily nodded slowly. To Maria. I have her number, Victor said. I want Samuel Orozco first. If Orozco will talk, if we can establish that someone inside the county office was asked to falsify records and refused, that's the mechanism. What makes this prosecutable, and not just a story about a pattern that Hollins's lawyers can argue, is coincidence. Decker found Orozco last night, Logan said. Of Tucson, working private accounting. Victor looked at Logan. I should approach him alone. Or with Emily. Not we stop choosing his words carefully. Not with the full club visible behind me. Already walked away from one uncomfortable situation. He needs to feel like he's walking towards something safe, not something that replaces one kind of pressure with another. Logan looked at Victor for a moment. But offended. Victor was right and they both knew it. Agreed, Logan said. Emily goes with you. Her grandmother's voice on that tape is the fastest way to make him understand that this is real and that it's been building for 20 years. Emily looked at Logan. You trust me to do this? Your grandmother's spent 20 years building the evidence, Logan said. It makes sense that her granddaughter is the one to use it. Emily nodded. Something in her posture shifted slightly, the particular alignment of a person who has accepted a responsibility and settled into it. Here we go. This morning, Victor said. Now, possible. Before the weekend gives anyone an excuse to wait until Monday. They left within the hour. They drove. Emily sat in the passenger seat with the cassette player Danny's road and the notebook and the manila envelope of photographs in a bag on her lap. The ring was in her jacket pocket. She had stopped taking it off. Drive north took 40 minutes. Victor used the time to brief Emily on how to handle a reluctant source. Let them talk. Don't push. Don't lead. Don't show your full hand until they've shown theirs. Emily listened and nodded and looked out the window at the desert moving past. You've done this before? Victor asked, about 20 minutes in. This exactly, Emily said. But I've had hard conversations. Grandmother was sick for 6 months. I had a lot of conversations nobody wanted to have. Victor was quiet for a moment. She raised you well, he said. She did, Emily said. Left it at that. Samuel Orozco lived in a tan house in a quiet subdivision that looked like 100 other quiet subdivisions north of Tucson. It's a pickup truck in the driveway and a row of potted plants along the front walk that someone had been watering carefully. That of a person who had built themselves a careful, contained life and valued keeping it that way. Victor knocked. The man who opened the door was 53 years old, at a medium height, with the expression of someone who has learned to read visitors quickly. He looked at Victor, at Emily, at the bag Emily was carrying. Something in his expression moved, not fear, exactly. Alertness of a person whose quiet life has just felt a draft. Orozco, Victor said. My name is Victor Reyes. You're a journalist. This is Emily Dawson. Her grandmother was Rose Dawson. We believe you may have known the name. Samuel Orozco's hand on the doorframe tightened very slightly. Mother knew the name, he said. She passed away 8 months ago, Emily said. Her voice was steady. She left me a tape recording. She mentions you specifically. She said you were asked to backdate a filing in 2019 and you refused and you resigned. Emily looked at him directly. She said you might be willing to talk if someone found you and you felt safe enough. Samuel Orozco looked at Emily for a long moment. The thing was already warming up, and the light was very direct and clear, a clarity that made it hard to be ambiguous about anything. I've been waiting slowly for 6 years for someone to knock on this door. He stepped back and let them in. They sat in his kitchen, which was the second kitchen Emily had sat in the last 12 hours, trying to pull the truth out of a past that didn't want to release it. Samuel Orozco made coffee with the automatic movements of someone who needed something to do with his hands while he decided how much to say. He made the decision quickly which told Emily he had made it years ago and just needed someone to show up to receive it. Patricia Hartwell came to me in the fall of 2019, he said, sitting down across from them. I had been in the records office for 11 years. Record. Never any problems. He wrapped his hands around his mug, called me into her office one afternoon, official meeting, unusual, and she gave me a file, a lean document. Told me the scan date on the digital record needed to be corrected. She said the original filing was from 1989, and it had been entered with the wrong date when it was digitized. He paused. Happens. Digitization errors are real. I had fixed them before, but something was wrong, Victor said. The document in the file was too clean, Samuel said. Bloody? The ink? The way the corners looked, it wasn't 30 years old. Oh, what 30-year-old documents look like. I had worked with thousands of them. He looked down at his coffee. I thought the document might be incorrectly dated. On the source document itself, just in the system, I said I needed to verify the original against the paper archive. What did she say? Emily asked. She said the paper archive for that period had been transferred to off-site storage and retrieval would take 6 to 8 weeks. Correction was time-sensitive. Samuel's voice was even. She said sometimes these things required judgment calls. The kitchen was very quiet. I wasn't comfortable making that call without verification, Samuel said. I needed to escalate it to the office director. He paused. She told me that wouldn't be necessary, that this was a routine administrative correction. The director had already been briefed. Another pause. And then she said something that she probably thought was reassuring, but was the moment I knew exactly what I was dealing with. What did she say? Victor said. Her looked up. She said, Samuel, the people involved in this transaction are good people. They take care of the people who work with them. You have a family. This is not something to make complicated. The air in the kitchen changed. She threatened your family, Emily said. She implied a threat and dressed it as reassurance, Samuel said. Which is worse in some ways, because you can't point to it directly. A little bit. You can't say this person threatened me when what they actually said was, you have a family. But I knew. I knew the moment she said it. He set down the mug. I went home that night and I told my wife everything. She said, my wife said, do you want to be someone who falsifies a document? And I said, no. And she said, then you're done there. He looked at Victor. I resigned the following week. I told HR it was a personal decision. I didn't file a complaint because I didn't trust that the process was clean. I've been in private accounting ever since, and I have not mentioned Patricia Hartwell's name to anyone except my wife. Until now, Victor said. Now, Samuel confirmed. Victor set his legal pad on the table. Would you be willing to make a formal statement? On record, attributed it? Samuel was quiet for exactly as long as it took him to look at Emily, to remember that the man at the other end of this conversation was Rose Dawson's legacy sitting across his kitchen table, and to decide that 6 years was long enough to wait. Plus, he said, I'll go on record. Victor wrote for 4 minutes without stopping. Emily sat and felt the specific weight of something that has just shifted irrevocably. Orozco had been a closed door for 6 years. And Rose Dawson, from 8 months in the past, had handed her granddaughter the key. While Victor was finishing his notes, Emily's phone rang. At the screen, Logan. She stepped outside to take it. The heat was already real and pressing, and she stood on Samuel Orozco's front walk between the carefully watered plants and answered. No problem, Logan said. No preamble. What happened? Danny's contact at the assessor's office just called him. Then ran a query this morning on the lien record for your grandmother's property. At 6:47 in the morning, Logan's voice was steady but fast. It came from inside the system. From Patricia Hartwell's login, Emily's stomach went cold. So, she knows someone is looking. She's checking to see if her file has been accessed, which means she either heard something or she's doing routine surveillance on the properties she's flagged. Logan paused. Either way, she knows something is moving, which means she's going to tell Hollins. How long do we have? I don't know. The window just got smaller. A brief pause. Did you get Orozco? He's going on record, Emily said. Logan was silent for one beat. That's good. That's very good. There's Victor needs to file something today. Not the full story, just enough to establish a public record that this is being investigated. Or something that makes it costly for Hollins to move against you. Victor will know how to handle that. Tell him about Hartwell's query this morning. He needs to know the clock, I will. Emily looked at the front door of Samuel Orozco's house. Again, are we going to be okay? A pause on the line that was not uncertainty. Logan choosing his words with the care he always brought to things that mattered. We have a tape, a notebook, 16 properties, a witness on record. Met the data proving falsification, he said. Hollins has lawyers and money and 20 years of goodwill. The truth. Another pause. In my experience, the truth wins if you give it enough daylight. We're about to give it a lot of daylight. Emily went back inside, told Victor about the query. Victor looked up from his legal pad, and for a moment, his expression did the quick calculation of someone who has been in this position before, the position where the story is ready to move. And the people who don't want it to move are beginning to notice that something is happening. Oh, I need to make a call, Victor said to Samuel. Can I use your kitchen for 5 more minutes? Samuel gestured. Go ahead. Victor called his editor. The conversation lasted 3 minutes, and Emily only heard one side of it, but she heard enough to understand the shape of it. Victor was describing the story. His editor was asking questions: liability, sourcing, verification, the speed of publication. Victor was answering with the particular confidence of a reporter who has his documentation in order and knows it. When Victor hung up, he said to Emily, "We're going to run a preliminary piece. Not the full investigation that takes more time to build responsibly. Targeted piece that establishes a public record of the investigation. Hollins Properties is under scrutiny. That documents are being examined. The sources have come forward." He looked at her. Once it's published, any move Hollins makes against you becomes very publicly visible. Clear protection. How soon? Tonight if we move fast. Tomorrow morning at the latest. Emily called Logan and told him. Logan was quiet for a moment. Then tell Victor I need him to add one more thing to that piece. What? The name Patricia Hartwell, Logan said, as a confirmed perpetrator, as a county official whose records have come under scrutiny as part of the investigation. He paused. Hartwell knows she's about to be named publicly. Well, she has a choice. She can take Hollins down with her by cooperating, or she can go down protecting him. Most people, when they see that choice clearly enough, make the right one. Emily relayed this to Victor about it for approximately 5 seconds. Not wrong, Victor said. That's actually a sound strategy. He wrote something on the legal pad. Let's go. They drove back toward Tucson. Victor was on his phone for most of the drive, talking to his editor, to a lawyer his paper kept on retainer, a second source he had developed independently whose name he didn't share. Emily sat in the passenger seat and felt the particular sensation of something that has been in motion for a very long time, finally reaching the speed it needed to reach. They were 20 minutes from the city when Emily's phone rang again. And this time, an unknown number, Arizona area code. Looked at the number and felt a different kind of cold. She answered, Miss Dawson. The voice was male, polished. A polish that comes from years of being paid to sound reasonable under circumstances that weren't. My name is Richard Crane. I'm general counsel for Hollins Properties. Because Mr. Hollins is aware that there may be some misunderstanding regarding the property dispute currently in litigation, and he'd like to resolve it quickly and fairly. Emily said nothing. Victor, hearing the change in the car's atmosphere, glanced at her. She held up one finger weight and put the call on speaker very quietly so Victor could hear. Hollins is prepared to withdraw the lien claim entirely, Richard Crane said, in exchange for a signed agreement that all claims against Hollins Properties are settled. All parties agree that the matter is resolved. A pause. Also prepared to offer a financial settlement of $50,000 for the inconvenience you've experienced. Offer is good until 5 o'clock today. Victor's jaw went tight. Emily's jaw went tight for a different reason. Mr. Hud, Emily said. Her voice came out even. I want to make sure I understand this correctly. Hollins is withdrawing his fraudulent lien claim, which was never legitimate to begin with, and offering me $50,000. The deadline for this offer is 5 o'clock today. She paused. A Saturday, a brief hesitation on Crane's end. I'm beat. That's correct. And in return, I agree that everything is resolved and I don't pursue any further claims. That's the substance of it. Mr. Crane, Emily said, who called your office this morning between 6:47 and 7 a.m. There's silence. It lasted exactly long enough to confirm what Emily needed to know. I'm not sure I understand the question, Crane said. I think you do, Emily said. Tell Mr. Hollins that his offer has been received and respectfully declined. And tell him that the next time he'd like to communicate with me, he can do it through the press. She ended the call. Victor was looking at her with an expression that was partly professional admiration and partly genuine surprise. He can do it through the press, Victor repeated. Okay, Emily said. She asked it sincerely, not for approval, but because she was checking her own instincts against someone who knew the landscape better. That was better than okay, Victor said. That was the right call made at exactly the right moment. He looked back at the road. I offered you $50,000 on a Saturday morning with a same-day deadline. What that means? He's panicking, Emily said. Panicking, Victor confirmed. He heard something from Hartwell, from somewhere, and he's trying to close this down before it gets daylight. Victor's voice had the energy now of a reporter who can feel a story arriving, which means he knows what he's done. He's not confused about whether the lien is legitimate. He knows he just believed that eventually everyone folds. He glanced at her. You didn't fold. My grandmother didn't fold, Emily said. I'm just finishing what she started. They pulled into the city and Victor called his editor again. And this time the conversation had a different energy, faster, more decisive, the back and forth of people who had reached the point of committing. Emily listened and understood that the article was becoming real in a way it hadn't been an hour ago. When Logan called at 10:15, Emily answered before the second ring. His lawyer called me, she said. A pause. When? 20 minutes ago. Offered to drop the lien and pay me $50,000. 5 o'clock today. Logan was quiet for 3 seconds. Done. That's what Victor said. Did you take it? No. Another pause. There. With something different in it. Good, Logan said. Don't take anything until this is public. Once it's public, any settlement he offers is going to be worth a lot more than $50,000. He paused. Lily, something else happened. She waited. Marcus went to talk to Maria Marchetti this morning, as his daughter. He went carefully just to make contact, see if she'd be willing to speak with Victor. Logan's voice had shifted. Not softer, quieter. Maria has been living with what happened to her mother for 15 years. Asked her mother to sell that house and spend the last 5 years of her life in a small apartment and never understand why the violations appeared out of nowhere. He paused. When Marcus told her why it really happened, Maria cried. Because she was surprised. Because she finally had a name for it. Another pause. She wants to go on record. Emily closed her eyes for a moment. 16 properties, 16 families. And now Maria Marchetti. And Samuel Orozco, and the tape, and the notebook, the metadata, and a journalist who hadn't slept, and a group of men who operated outside the channels that Hollins had spent 20 years learning to influence. How many people are we talking about? Emily said. How many families are willing to talk? Marcus is working on that right now, Logan said. They're at the morning making careful contacts. So far, Maria Marchetti, a woman named Robert Jimenez, whose parents sold in 2009. A woman named Clara Esteves, whose husband sold in 2012 and never understood why they got so little for it. He paused. 3 families who lost something and never got answers. They have answers. And they're angry, Emily said. Angry, Logan confirmed. The right kind of angry, one that wants justice instead of revenge. He paused, which is exactly what we need. At 11 o'clock, Victor's lawyer called with a concern. The concern was the tape specifically, a cassette recording made by a private individual without the knowledge of the people being observed, could be used in a published story. They handled the call in the car with Emily listening, and she understood enough to know that the tape itself was not directly quotable in the article, but could be referenced as source material that corroborated on record testimony. It didn't matter, because by 11:15, they had Samuel Orozco on record, and Maria Marchetti, through Marcus. They had Robert Jimenez. They had the metadata from Danny's contact. They had Decker's research on the 16 properties. They had the settlement offer made that morning by Hollins's own lawyer, which was as close to an admission as you could get without a courtroom. Up was the foundation. The witnesses were the building. There was writing as they drove. At 12:40, Logan called again. This time his voice was different, urgent, sharp. Danny just heard from his contact, Logan said. Tricia Hartwell did not come into work this morning, old and sick, but her login was used at 6:47 to access the lien record. Emily felt the sharpness of it. Login, but not her. Her login, but not her, Logan said. It's one of two things. Either Hollins's people have her login credentials and access the record themselves, or Hartwell was in the office early and left before her official start time, Emily fit, which means she might be trying to distance herself before things move. Or she's already talking to someone, Logan said. Lawyer. Or someone else. The someone else hung in the air between them. The DA's office has a public integrity unit, Logan said. Hartwell reached out to them. It's possible she's been scared enough by whatever she heard this morning to start thinking about her own position. If she's cooperating with the DA Emily started, Hollins's problem just became considerably worse than a newspaper article, Logan said. Emily looked at Victor. Did you hear that? Victor, who had been listening with half his attention while writing with the other half, nodded without looking up. I heard it. He wrote for another 10 seconds and then he stopped. He looked at Emily. I need you to understand something, Victor said. Well, as talking to the public integrity unit, this story is about to move faster than any of us planned for. Well, the DA's office doesn't wait for newspapers. If they open a formal investigation, there'll be warrants. There will be searches. Hollins's financial records, his communications with Hartwell, everything it goes into a legal process that we have very little control over. He paused. That's good for justice. That's great for the families who lost their homes. It means the story I was going to publish tonight might be preempted by a press release from the DA's office. Does that matter? Emily said. The families? No. For Gerard Hollins? No. For the outcome? Victor shook his head. No, what matters is that it ends. He looked back at the road. I'm going to make a call to the public integrity unit directly. Not to tip them off. They don't need me for that. Let them know that a journalist has sourced documentation and witnesses. Whatever their timeline is, our timeline is today. He glanced at her. For them to move faster when they know a story is about to break anyway. Make the call, Emily said. I made the call. The public integrity unit of the Pima County DA's office did not confirm or deny anything. Who answered the call, a senior investigator whose name Victor knew, because he had covered her unit for 4 years, did not tell Victor he had the wrong number. She said she would pass the information along to the relevant team and that they appreciated the heads up. Well, in Victor's experience, that language meant exactly what it sounded like. At 30 in the afternoon, Emily's phone rang for the third time from an unknown number. This time it was not Richard Crane's polished voice on the other end. It was a woman. Ms. Dawson, the woman said. My name is Patricia Hartwell. Her voice was doing the particular work of someone holding themselves very carefully together. Your number from a mutual contact. I apologize for calling directly. I don't have many options left. A pause. I need to speak with the journalist who's been working on this story. I need to speak with him today. Emily sat very still. Why are you calling me? Emily said. Why not call him directly? Because I needed to speak to you first, Patricia Hartwell said. The carefully held composure cracked, very slightly, at the edges. I need you to know that I understood a long time that what I was doing was wrong. I need you to know that I tried twice to stop. And I need you to know that the reason I didn't stop, the reason I kept going, was because Gerard Hollins made it very clear that what he knew about me would be more damaging than the damage I could do him. A pause. I was trapped. I'm not saying that to excuse what I did. I'm saying it because it's true. And because if I'm going to tell this story honestly, then that part of it has to be honest too. Emily looked at Victor. Victor had stopped writing. He was blackmailing you, Emily said. Murderers. Yes, Patricia Hartwell said. The word landed like something dropped from a considerable height. Emily said. A long pause. Something from 20 years ago. Something I did before I understood the full consequences. Something that he found out about and kept. Her voice was very quiet now. He never had to threaten me directly. He just reminded me occasionally that he knew. That was enough. Emily was quiet for a moment. Miss Hartwell, she said, there are 16 families who lost their homes. I know, the voice broke. Just slightly, I know. I have known that for years. I had to get up every morning and go to that office and know it. She steadied herself. I am not a good person, but I don't want to be this person anymore. I understand that cooperating now doesn't fix what I did. I don't have anywhere else to go. Emily looked at Victor. Was already writing. Miss Hartwell, Emily said. The journalist's name is Victor Reyes. I'm going to give you his number right now. I'm going to call someone I trust and ask him what, in his experience, it looks like when someone decides to do the right thing after a long time of doing the wrong thing. She gave Hartwell the number. She looked at Victor for a moment. Then she called Logan. Patricia Hartwell just called me, she said. A pause. Operating, Logan said. Not a question. She says Hollins was blackmailing her. Emily's voice was steady. There's to talk to Victor. Logan was quiet for a moment that had a particular quality to it, the quality of a man who has seen enough of the world to know that almost everyone, eventually, is carrying something they can't put down alone. Victor, to be fair with her, Logan said. She did wrong for a long time, but she's doing right now. Both things are true. He paused. This ends cleanly. Everyone tells the truth, whole truth, and the people who built the system take the weight it deserves. Logan, Emily said. My grandmother was right about you. A pause. Longer than his usual ones. What did she say? He said. In the tape, Emily said. She said that when she met your brother that night, that when she made the choice to stop, she looked at him and saw someone who wasn't a bad person. A person who had made a bad choice and deserved better than to be defined by it forever. She paused. The way his brother thanked her the next day, the way you thanked her, told her the same thing about you. Understood what it meant when someone risked something for someone else. She stopped. She was right. Logan didn't say anything for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was the quietest she'd heard it. It was a remarkable woman, he said. She was, Emily said. Let's make sure it meant something. Outside Victor's car, I moved through it Saturday afternoon. The way cities move when they don't yet know something important is happening. Inside them, ordinary, unhurried, unbothered. People were shopping and eating and driving their children somewhere and telling themselves the story of a normal day. In a kitchen, in a quiet subdivision north of the city, a man named Samuel Orozco was writing out a formal statement he had been waiting 6 years to make. In a house across town, a woman named Maria Marchetti was calling her brother to tell him they finally had an answer. Moving through the city, a journalist was on the phone with a woman who had just decided that the person she wanted to be was more important than the person she had been pressured to become. In a storage unit off a highway on the edge of town, a book in the handwriting of a woman who had been gone for 8 months was waiting to be read by the people who could finally do something with what it contained. Rose Dawson had spent 20 years building something in silence and in patience. Silence was over, and Gerard Hollins in his large house, telling himself the unease was nothing. As his phone was ringing, and the name on the screen was Richard Crane, and Richard Crane never called twice in one day unless something had gone very, very wrong. Richard Crane called Gerard Hollins at 2:14 on a Saturday afternoon. By the third sentence of that call, Hollins understood that the containment strategy he had been running for 2 decades had just hit something it couldn't contain. Crane's voice was the voice of a lawyer who has absorbed bad news and is now transmitting it as cleanly as possible. Panic. Just precision. The precision of a very expensive man delivering information that was about to become more expensive. Patricia Hartwell has made contact with a journalist, Crane said. We believe she has also made contact with the Public Integrity Unit of the DA's office. Another source in the building confirms a meeting was scheduled for this afternoon. Holland said nothing for a moment. The journalist is Victor Reyes, Crane continued. He's been working independently. He has sources. He has documentation. There wishes. And based on what we're hearing, he has witnesses on record. Piece to publish a pause. Gerard. The window we had this morning is closed. Holland sat with his phone pressed to his ear and felt something he had not felt in 20 years of operating in this county. Not fear exactly. Something colder and more precise than fear. The sensation of a man who has built something very carefully over a very long time, watching the first support beam crack. How many witnesses? Holland said. At least 3 that we know of, possibly more. And Hartwell is cooperating fully. Crane's voice stayed even. She has agreed to provide a complete accounting of every record alteration she performed at the direction of Holland's properties. In exchange for cooperation, the DA is likely to offer her reduced exposure. A pause. Third, she's been keeping her own records. She documented every instruction you gave her. The second support beam cracked. Holland stood up. He walked to the window. He looked out at a view he had paid a great deal of money for. And he felt, for the first time, in longer than he could clearly remember, completely alone inside it. Get me every attorney we have on retainer, he said. Right. Already done, Crane said. But Gerard, I need you to understand something. This is no longer a situation that legal strategy can fully manage. A county official cooperates with a public integrity investigation when there are documented witnesses, when there is a journalist with source material ready to publish. The question is no longer whether this becomes public. The question is what shape it takes when it does. A pause that carried weight. There may be an argument for getting ahead of it. Getting ahead of it, Hollins repeated. Voluntary cooperation, proactive disclosure, as a business that encountered ethical failures and is taking responsibility. Crane said it carefully. The way you say something to a man who needs to hear it but is not going to like it won't prevent consequences, but it affects their shape. Hollins said, "Be back in an hour." He ended the call. He stood at his window for a long time, and for the first time, 20 years, he thought about Dolores Marchetti, about her not because he felt guilty about her specifically. Guilt required a level of direct emotional accounting that Hollins had learned to circumvent, but because she was the beginning, and beginnings have a way of surfacing when the ending approaches. He had never thought of the people as people. He had thought of them as properties with complications, properties with owners who could be managed. He had built a system so clean and so incremental that any single piece of it, viewed in isolation, looked like nothing more than the ordinary friction of real estate transactions. A lien here, a code violation there, a settlement that everyone walked away from without technically being wronged. That was how he had told himself the story. But Rose Dawson had been telling it differently for 20 years, writing it down, naming names, keeping photographs. Her granddaughter had put a ring on a motorcycle seat. Hollins poured himself a drink and did not touch it. 60 miles away in Danny Carter's kitchen, Logan set down his phone and looked at the room. Ryan was there. Danny was there. Marcus had come back from his morning of careful conversations with his jacket off and his sleeves rolled up and the look of a man who had covered a lot of ground. He was at the table with his laptop, still building the picture, still finding threads and following them to where they led. Hollins, Logan said, "Hartwell is talking to the DA. He is going to break today." The room absorbed this. Ryan looked up. "It's over? The legal part is starting," Logan said. "We controlled is ending." He sat down. Victor's story will publish tonight or tomorrow morning. The DA's office will move. When they move, we don't control that timeline. What we need to make sure of is that Emily is positioned correctly when all of it hits. Her name is going to be in the story. She's going to be the person who brought this forward. Hollins' lawyers, even while cooperating, are going to look for any pressure point they can use. She's at Victor's office, Marcus said. No, I want someone there. Marcus was already standing. Oh, take Decker. Decker closed the laptop without a word and they were gone. Ryan looked at Logan across the table. What do you need me to do? Stay here, Logan said. Be reachable. He looked at his brother. And maybe think about what you want to say to her. To Emily. Because when this is finished, when it's really finished, she's going to need to hear something from you that isn't about the case. Ryan was quiet for a moment. What do you mean? I mean that she came to us because of a promise her grandmother made. She came to us because she needed help. Logan looked at his brother steadily. What she's carrying that isn't about the property. What she's carrying about losing Rose that doesn't get resolved in a courtroom. And at some point, when the noise of all of this quiets down, is going to need to tell her that her grandmother's 20 years of work mattered. As evidence, as a life. He paused. You're the person who can do that. You're the only one who can, really. Ryan looked down at the table. At the ring that Emily had left there earlier, she had put it down when she was looking through the documents and hadn't taken it back when they left. And it had been sitting in the middle of Danny's kitchen table like a small compass since then. She was a stranger to me, Ryan said. Rose, she stopped for 30 minutes on a dark road, and she saved my life, and she kept a secret for 27 years, and I never even knew her name. He picked up the ring, turned it once in his fingers the way Logan had turned it the first time. He turned it the way Emily had turned it, the way it had been turned by every person in the story who was trying to understand what it weighed. How do you thank someone for that? You start by saying it, Logan said. The rest takes care of itself. At Victor's office, the afternoon moved like a controlled burn. Intentional, fast, consuming exactly what it was supposed to consume. Victor was writing the article in real time, updating it as information arrived. His editor was on a call in the next room. The paper's lawyer was on speakerphone, reviewing sections as they were completed, flagging anything that needed tightening, confirming that every named claim had source documentation to support it. Emily sat across from Victor's desk and watched the machine of journalism work and felt the strange doubling sensation of being both inside a story and outside it at the same time. Orozco had emailed his formal statement at noon. Just 3 pages long, precise, dated, specific. Every sentence of it was the sentence of a man who had been waiting to write it for 6 years and had composed it carefully inside his own head long before he put it on paper. Maria Marchetti had given Victor a 40-minute recorded interview by phone from her home. She had spoken about her mother with the specific grief of someone who mourns not just the loss of a person, but the particular injustice of how the loss was shaped. She talked about visiting her mother in that 2-room apartment, the way her mother had stopped talking about the house after the first year because talking about it hurt too much. About how her mother had gone to her grave without understanding why. She had failed somehow. Maria had said on the recording. She thought maybe she had missed something in the paperwork. Or maybe she should have been smarter. Maybe she should have hired someone. A pause. She spent 5 years thinking it was her fault. Victor had that quote attributed and sourced, and it was going in the article. And Emily had heard it and felt it settle into her bones next to everything else she'd been carrying since the previous Friday evening, like both a week ago and 10 minutes ago. Perez arrived at Victor's office at 3 o'clock with Decker behind him, and their arrival changed the texture of the room in a way that was hard to name, but was immediately felt. There was something about the physical presence of men who understood both weight and loyalty that made a room feel more solid. Emily noticed it and was grateful for it without saying so. Anything from Logan? She asked Marcus. He said to tell you the chapter is standing by, Marcus said. Not theatrically, just factually, whatever you need. Emily nodded. At her 15, Victor's editor knocked and came in from the next room. She was a woman in her early 60s named Janet O'Coffer, and she had the particular authority of someone who had edited consequential stories for 30 years and had developed a precise internal instrument for knowing when a story was ready and when it was not. Hey, she said. She looked at Emily. You're named as the person who brought this investigation forward. Your name, your grandmother's name, the property address. Understand that? I understand, Emily said. A response from Hollins's team. Probably tonight. Probably aggressive, at least initially. Janet looked at her steadily. There will be media attention. This is not a small story. Property fraud affecting 16 families, a county official cooperating with the DA, years of documentation by a woman who worked alone with no institutional support. She paused. They're going to want to talk to you. I know, Emily said. Are you ready? Emily thought of Rose Dawson's voice on the cassette tape. The specific steadiness of it. The patience of a woman who had held something difficult for a very long time without letting it make her hard. I'm ready, Emily said. Janet nodded. She looked at Victor. English at 6. She went back to the next room. Victor looked at Emily. He didn't say anything because the moment didn't need words. He had to pop his tape on the corners, and Victor Reyes was good enough at his job to know the difference between moments that needed words and moments that needed presence. He just nodded once. A nod that said, we did this right. Logan. It publishes at 6, she said. Buzz. You okay? Ask me at 7, she said. Fair enough. A brief pause, Emily. Whatever happens tonight, whatever the noise level is, you did something real. You finished something that deserved to be finished. Remember that when it gets loud. Logan, she said. This is done. Whatever done looks like. I'd like to meet Ryan properly. In the middle of everything. Just properly. He'd like that too, Logan said. Told me to tell you that. He did? He's been sitting here for the last 2 hours, trying to figure out how to say something to you that doesn't sound inadequate, Logan said. Get him to just say it. Emily smiled, the first full, unguarded smile she'd had in longer than she could clearly track. Tell him it won't sound inadequate. She hung up. 5:47, 13 minutes before the article was scheduled to publish. Emily's phone rang. The number was blocked. She almost didn't answer. There she answered, Ms. Dawson. The voice was older. Male, tired in a way that was different from the tiredness of a long day. Tiredness of a long calculation that had finally resolved in a direction the person hadn't wanted it to resolve in. This is Gerard Hollins. The room. Victor Marcus went completely still. Emily put the call on speaker without being asked. Hollins, she said. I understand an article is being published tonight, Hollins said. I understand you have been the central figure in bringing this forward. A pause. I'm not calling to negotiate. Richard already tried that. I'm not calling to threaten you, because I think you understand by now that I'm well past the point where threats make sense. Another pause, longer this time. I'm calling because I think you deserve to hear this directly. Emily said nothing. Whatever. She let him talk. I started Hollins Properties in 2001 with money I borrowed from my brother, Hollins said. First property I developed, legitimately. The second one too. Third, a pause. The system what I built with Patricia, it didn't start as a plan. It is as a solution to a problem I had with one specific property. A lien that I needed to resolve quickly. Patricia knew a way. I paid her to do it, and then he stopped. And then the next problem was easier to solve the same way. And the one after that, his voice had the quality of a man describing something from a distance he had finally reached. Myself, the properties weren't worth what the county said. I told myself the people were going to sell anyway. Myself 100 things. A very long pause. I don't think any of them were true. The room stayed quiet. What do you want, Mr. Hollins? Emily said. I don't know, he said. It sounded true. I think I wanted to say to someone who is actually the right person to say it, to that what your grandmother did, keeping that record, building that documentation, I think she was right to do it. I'm not sure that means anything. I understand it might not. It seemed important to say. Emily thought about what to say to a man who had spent 20 years dismantling the lives of people who couldn't fight back. About Dolores Marchetti in her 2-room apartment, going to her grave thinking she had failed. She thought about Maria, Robert Jimenez, about Clara Esteves, about 12 other families documented in a green spiral notebook by a woman who had done it out of sheer moral clarity and had no other tool available to her. About what her grandmother would say. Mr. Collins, Emily said. The families you took from, they deserve to know what really happened. In a press release, and not through a lawyer. They deserve to know that someone is accountable. She paused. Cooperation with the DA's office is real and not strategic. Then demonstrate it fully. Don't minimize. Don't manage. Give them everything. Another pause. That's what you can do. That's the only thing that means anything now. Hollins was quiet for a long moment. Right? He said quietly, simply, like a man who has set down something that was too heavy to carry and has finally accepted that the setting down is permanent. Oh, he ended. Nobody in the room spoke for a moment. Nurse exhaled slowly. Decker looked at the table. Victor closed his laptop 1 inch, then opened it again because he still had work to do. And the work was what mattered. Emily looked at her phone for a moment after the call ended. Letters. Then she said, publish it. Victor opened the file, made 2 final checks, looked at his editor through the glass of the next room. Okafor nodded. Victor hit publish at 5:59, 1 minute early, because some things have waited long enough. The article went live with the headline, 20 years of fraud. One developer and a county official stripped 16 Tucson families of their homes. Reyes, investigative reporter, published 5:59 p.m. Rare day. The first thing that happened was nothing. Always how it started. Publication was not the climax. Publication was the moment you released something into the current and then watched to see how far and how fast it moved. The thing that happened was that Emily's phone buzzed with a text from Logan. Plus, saw it. It's good. You did good. She sat with that for a moment. It was enough. The third thing that happened was that the Arizona Republic City desk picked up the story within 20 minutes and started making calls. Earth was that a local television station sent a crew to Hollins Properties' corporate office, which was locked and empty on a Saturday, and filed a report anyway with Victor's article as the source basis. The fifth was that Maria Marchetti posted on her personal Facebook page a photograph of her mother, standing in front of the house she had lost, and wrote her name was Dolores Marchetti. She deserved better. Tonight we know why she didn't get it. She included a link to Victor's article. Was shared 41 times in the first hour. It was shared 380 times by midnight. At 7:30, Victor got a call from a colleague at the Phoenix paper who had already heard about the story and wanted to know if Victor was available for a phone interview to discuss the investigation. Victor said yes, and they talked for 20 minutes. Blake mentioned carefully that the story had resonance beyond Tucson, a particular combination of county record manipulation, elderly and minority property owners, and a 20-year documentation effort by a single private citizen was the kind of thing that didn't stay local. Victor had known that. He had written it knowing that. At 8 o'clock, Logan in front of Victor's building only came out. The evening was warm, the sun fully down now. Specific Arizona dark that came quickly and completely at the end of a desert day. Into the passenger seat. Logan didn't say anything right away. For a few blocks, in the quiet that had been established between them over the last 36 hours, the kind of quiet that two people develop when they have been through something together quickly and the shared experience, the shorthand, that doesn't need much noise. What are you doing? He said, actually asking. I'm going to feel this tomorrow, Emily said. I think I've been running on something for 2 days that isn't going to be there when I wake up. She looked at the passing street. Right now I feel clear, like something that was foggy has been made clear. I don't know if that makes sense. It makes sense, Logan said. Where are we going? Danny's, he said. Ryan's there. Who else to talk to you? Emily nodded. She looked out the window for a moment. Then, the families, the 16. What happens to them now? The DA's investigation will establish the fraud legally, Logan said. Like the basis for civil claims against Hollins Properties. But those properties can't be returned. They've been developed again. But the value can be compensated. The legal framework for that takes time. It exists. He paused. Victor's article creates public pressure that tends to accelerate that kind of thing. He wants to be the judge who moves slowly on a story everyone read. And the families who already settled are part of the pattern, Logan said. Clay's office will look at all of them. Anyone who can document the circumstances of their sale is in a position to make a claim. He glanced at her. Your grandmother documented all 12 of the ones she knew about. Documentation is going to be important for families who might not have kept their own records. Emily closed her eyes for a moment. Of everything. She had 20 years to think of it, Logan said, and she spent every one of them thinking. They arrived at Danny's. Ryan was in the kitchen where he had been for most of the day, and when Emily walked in, he stood up with the particular movement of someone who has been sitting with something they needed to say and has finally been given the moment to say it. The room had Danny in it, Marcus, who had come back, arouses, and Decker, who was quieter than usual, which for Decker meant he was paying attention to something that mattered. Ryan looked at Emily. He had the ring in his hand. He had been holding it, apparently, for most of the day, and it showed in the way his hand held it not tight, loose, the grip of someone who has been thinking through the object in their hand. Been trying to figure out what to say to you for about 8 hours, he said. Then told me, Emily said. Did he tell you what I finally figured out? No, Ryan looked at the ring. What about that night? For 27 years, he said. What about the person who stopped? I used to have a picture in my head of who it was, the kind of person who would stop on a dark road for a stranger at that hour. What about them when things were hard, when I needed to remember that those people existed in the world. He looked up at Emily. I had no idea that person was spending those same 27 years watching what was happening to her neighbors and writing it all down in a green notebook, totally alone, because she believed the truth should survive, even when no one was listening to it. He stopped. The person in my head was already remarkable. The real person is, he stopped again. I don't have the word for it. Emily stood across from him and felt the grief and the gratitude arrive together in the way that things which have been held apart for a long time tend to arrive when they finally meet all at once. The weight that is not unpleasant but is very real. She would have liked you, Emily said. She had a low tolerance for people who couldn't look you in the eye when they talked to you. You're looking me in the eye, Ryan smiled. It was small and it was genuine. Well, it sounds like someone who didn't have much patience for anything that wasn't honest. Zero patience, Emily said. Absolute zero. She could spot evasion at 100 yards and she found it personally offensive. She felt the smile on her own face and was glad for it. She would have liked this whole situation, actually. Ring working, someone listening. She paused. She would have been very annoyed that it took this long, and she would have said so clearly to everyone present. A laugh moved around the room. Oh, genuine, small, the kind that comes from people who have been through something serious together and are recognizing each other on the other side of it. Well, Ryan held out the ring. Emily took it. She held it for a moment, and then she did something she hadn't planned to do. She turned to Logan, who was standing near the kitchen doorway with his arms at his sides, and the specific look of a man who has organized something that has just concluded and is letting the conclusion happen without him in the center of it. I want you to have this, Emily said to Logan. She held the ring out, looked at it. Emily, not because you need it, as a debt. She held his gaze. Because my grandmother gave it to your brother, and your brother couldn't give it back, and you've been carrying the weight of that for 27 years. She paused. Because she intended it as a connection, not a transaction. Connection between two families who had something in common. She kept her hand extended. Keep it as that. Logan looked at the ring for a long moment. The kitchen was very quiet. He reached out and took it, turned it once in his fingers, the way he had turned it in the diner parking lot. All of them had turned it at some point in the last 36 hours when they were trying to understand what it weighed. He closed his hand around it. Thank you, he said, and said it like a man who understood the full dimension of the word. The next weeks moved with the particular momentum of a true story that the world has decided it needs to hear. Victor's article was picked up by 12 outlets in the first 48 hours. Arizona Republic ran a follow-up. The Phoenix television stations ran segments. A national outlet's investigative team reached out to Victor, about a collaborative piece on the broader pattern of property fraud targeting elderly homeowners in growing Sunbelt cities. The county DA's office opened a formal investigation into Holland's properties and Patricia Hartwell within 72 hours of Victor's article publishing. Investigation was announced in a press release that used the language of a public institution that had been moving toward this announcement for some time and had been given a useful push. Bernard Hollands' cooperation was noted as a factor in the determination of charges. Patricia Hartwell entered into a cooperation agreement. Her testimony, combined with the documentation she had maintained, provided the prosecutorial backbone of the case. The records she had altered 18 in total. It's a span of 14 years, not 16, as Victor had initially identified, were each individually documented and presented as evidence. Not 16. 2 more than anyone had found. More families, 2 more quiet settlements that nobody had connected until Hartwell laid out the full picture. When Emily heard the number, she sat down in a chair in her living room, her actual living room, her apartment, the one she had returned to after the first week, because Logan had confirmed that Hollands was cooperating and the immediate pressure had released. And she sat there for a long time. There are 18 families. Her grandmother had found 12 and documented them painstakingly over 20 years. Her had identified 16, working at journalist speed with professional tools. And the real number was 18. Rose Dawson had spent 2 decades catching every signal she could with the instruments available to her. Not all of them, but she had caught enough. Enough to build something that could not be dismissed. Enough to give the people who came after her the foundation they needed to find the rest. They picked up the phone and called Logan. 18, she said when he answered. I saw, he said. She found 12, Emily said. She never knew about the other 6. No, Logan said. 20 years doing everything she could, and she still missed 6. Emily, I know, she said. Her voice was steady. I know that 12 out of 18 is extraordinary for one woman working alone. I know that. I'm not saying she failed. She paused. Let's keep thinking about the 6 families she never knew about. And she didn't find. She found enough, Logan said. Enough that the 6 were found too. The chain she built is the reason we got to all 18. A pause. A woman working alone in her house in southeast Tucson built a chain of evidence strong enough to reach across 20 years and catch something a county official, developer, and a network of lawyers all tried to make disappear. He let that land. She didn't miss the 6. She built the thing that found them. Emily was quiet for a long moment. There, she said. Okay, she said again. And meant it this time. The house was returned to Emily 4 months after the investigation began. The lien was formally vacated. The deed transfer was completed without complication. The assessor's office, under newly appointed interim leadership following Patricia Hartwell's departure, does the paperwork with the particular speed of an institution that needs to demonstrate that it functions correctly and is paying close attention. Emily stood in the house alone on the day she got the keys. Just stood in it, in the specific quiet of a place that had been waiting. The kitchen still had the shelf where Rose kept her flour and her baking powder. The porch step still squeaked. The cabinet by the window still stuck when the humidity was right. Everything that had always been true about this house was still true about it. Undisturbed, patient, the way houses are patient with the people who inhabit them. Called Logan from the kitchen. I'm in the house, she said. How does it feel? He said. Like Saturday morning, she said. Understood what she meant without needing it explained. 3 days later, Emily drove out to the cemetery where Rose Dawson was buried. The copy of Victor's final investigative piece, the long one, the one that ran 6,000 words and included the names of all 18 families and the complete timeline of what Hollands and Hartwell had built and what it had cost, and she set it on the grave. She knew it would be gone in the rain or the wind. It was fine. She sat on the ground beside the grave, the way you sit beside someone you are still in conversation with. She talked about the ring and about Logan and about Ryan. Talked about Victor and about Marcus and about Decker and about Danny, who had come through at midnight on a Friday, because his brother asked, and his brother's word was enough. Talked about Samuel Orozco and about Maria Marchetti and about the way Maria had cried on the phone, not because she was surprised, but because she was finally not alone in it. Talked about Patricia Hartwell, who had done wrong for a long time and had chosen to stop, and about how that choice had cost her considerably, but had also been the thing that made 18 whole instead of 12. Talked about Gerard Hollins, who was cooperating with the DA and would face consequences that were significant and insufficient at the same time. Because the consequences of fraud can be measured, but the consequences to 18 families cannot be fully measured in any legal framework. And then she stopped talking about other people, and she just talked to Rose. Talked about the Saturday morning biscuits, about the squeak on the back porch step, and the cabinet that stuck. Talked about summers spent in that house, learning the particular kind of patience that you can only learn from someone who has it in abundance. Talked about the green notebook and the cassette tape, and the way her grandmother's voice on that tape had been calm, in a way that was not the calm of someone who had given up, but the calm of someone who had decided. You decided, Emily said, to the headstone and the desert air and whatever of her grandmother remained in both. You couldn't stop him alone, so you decided to build something that would stop him after you were gone. You decided that the truth was worth 20 years of writing it down with nobody to read it. She paused. I think that's the bravest thing I've ever heard of anyone doing. She sat there until the sun shifted. Then she stood up, brushed the dust off her jeans, and drove back to the house. The house that was hers, always been hers, that a notebook and a cassette tape and a ring and 36 hours of people choosing to do the right thing had made irrevocably, permanently, legally, and entirely hers. 2 weeks after that, Ben called her. The chapter is having a gathering, he said. Not a formal thing, just the brothers and some people. At Danny's, Ryan will be there. A pause. We'd like you to come. Emily said yes without hesitating. On a Sunday afternoon, and the first thing she noticed was the number of motorcycles in Danny's driveway. And along the street, she had been in enough proximity to this world in the last few months to understand that the number was significant. People had come from some distance, that this was more than the immediate chapter. Logan met her at the door. They came because of you, he said. Of them. They wanted to meet the woman who started this. I didn't start it, Emily said. The grandmother started it. Then they wanted to meet the woman who finished it, Logan said. Inside, the gathering had the specific texture of a group of people who live most of their lives in a particular kind of serious and have found a reason to be something else for an afternoon. There was food, and there was noise, and there were men with road names and histories that Emily only partially knew, introducing themselves to her with a directness and a courtesy that she hadn't entirely expected and was grateful for. And found her in the kitchen. He had a cup of coffee and the expression of someone who has moved through a difficult thing and come out the other side with a clearer sense of who he is. How's the house? He said. Good, she said. The cabinet still sticks. He smiled. Fix it. I'm not fixing, she said. Not ever. They stood in Danny's kitchen and talked for 20 minutes about nothing in particular about the town, Ryan's work, about a restaurant Emily had found near the house that made food that reminded her of something she couldn't fully identify. Ordinary conversation of two people who have been introduced through extraordinary circumstances and are now finding out whether they are also people who can occupy ordinary space together. However, Logan came and found them at some point and stood there for a moment without interrupting. Just there, the way he had been present throughout all of it, not at the center, not driving, just holding the space steady while the people inside it did what they needed to do. He put the ring on Danny's kitchen table, not giving it back, just setting it down in the space between them. The ring that had traveled from Logan's hand to Rose Dawson's hand to a cloth in a box under a bed to Emily's hand to Logan's hand, again small, touched, simple, with an engraving worn down to almost nothing, but still there if you pressed your thumb to it in the right way. My grandmother used to say, Logan said, that what you give freely always comes back in better shape than when you gave it. He looked at the ring and then at Emily. It wasn't always right, but she was right about that. Emily picked up the ring for a moment. Then she put it on her finger where it had never been before, but where it fit as if it had always been intended to arrive there. And she looked at it once, and then she looked at the people around that table, Ryan and Logan and Danny and Marcus and Decker, and she felt the particular wholeness of a thing that has been long unfinished and is finally, completely and irreversibly done. Rose Dawson had stopped on a dark road 27 years ago for a stranger because it was right. Spent 20 years keeping a record because it was right. She had left a ring and a notebook and a voice on a cassette tape because she believed that the truth, given enough care and enough time, would find its way to the people who could carry it forward. And she had been right about that too. The ring was home. This was home. The truth was public and permanent and belonged now to the 18 families who had needed it for years. And in a kitchen in Tucson, Arizona, surrounded by people connected by a debt that had started as one act of human decency on a dark road and had compounded over 27 years into something neither larger nor smaller than justice, Lee Dawson wore her grandmother's ring and understood that some stories do not end, they simply arrive at the place they were always traveling toward, and the arriving is enough.